Wukong sucks, and here's why.
Is
Wukong,
sucks.
Wukong is bad
bad.
games, and here is why.
Oh, it's probably because of feminism, huh?
Black Myth Wukong was ruined by the woke mob.
I wish
Finally.
I wish that the answer to why Wukong is a bad game was as simple as that, but it's not.
Is it not? Isn't it just
Yeah.
bad? Like, it's just poorly made. Like, it's a game that clearly ran out of Steam money and everything.
I don't think there's any universe where it ran
No.
out of money.
No,
I think
yeah.
Wukong had infinite money, and that's part of it's in some ways part of its problems, because sometimes you're like,
It had infinite money?
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
it needed an accountant because it wasn't being spent on the game.
Well, like,
No.
Where did that money go?
Wukong, like, is you can sense this while you're playing it, like an extravagant expense. Like,
Yeah.
every transition between each chapter literally has like a different, like, seemingly like major studio doing like the animation that in a different art style and medium each time. Like, I was like, wait, the second one's in stop motion? What's happening?
Yeah.
And like,
That's wild.
this game legitimately has another boss fight every 5 minutes, to the point where there might be 200 boss fights or some shit, and they're not like the Elden Ring repeating dragons. It's like, oh, there's another boss fight over and over again. Like, it's like there was like seemingly infinite manpower and money. It's just incompetent. Like, on
Yeah.
like really basic stuff is horribly wrong. Like, the levels don't level and stuff like that. Like, because they don't, like, there isn't the seemingly the development context to make the levels make sense in any real way. It's a really strange, weird experience, because it's like a mixture of like extremely expensive stuff that had to take incredible amounts of time to make, and then also just the worst ideas you've ever seen. So like, it's a
Yeah.
weird dissonance I haven't seen since like Resident Evil 6 when it first came out, and you're like, this game was made by 600 people and it made $1 billion were put into it, and then you play it and you're like, why did they think I wanted to like luchador kick people and action roll and trip on zombie bodies, and I don't want to play this game anymore.
Yeah. So Wukong is like a nightmare video game. And I hate it so much. So I've put over 40 hours into the game. I'm in the middle of chapter 4 of 6. And if I did not make content for an audience, I would have thrown this game into a trash compactor and
This game
never
got
played
so
it again.
bad for me so quickly. Like, it was, there were signs all along, but specifically in chapter 3 it completely disintegrates in a way that broke my trust and made me dread the idea of playing the game for dozens more hours, that I quit it in chapter 3. And I haven't quit a game that I was doing a series on since like 2018.
Really? You quit Wukong?
Yes. No, I
Yeah.
quit. I'm not playing it anymore. I'm not going to see the rest of it.
Wow.
I can't. I was so unhappy.
I know the feeling, and that does take courage, because you're breaking with your modus operandi. So
Like, the last time I did this was Dynasty Warriors 9, which was the open world Dynasty Warriors. I'm like, Dynasty Warriors back. Yeah, I'm having fun running around doing these objectives. And then I finished my first episode and rendered and uploaded that. Then went right back to recording more of it that day, because I was like all hyped up about it. And over the course of the next like 3 hours, it just like turned to ash in my mouth. And I'm like, oh no.
Oh, no.
I signed up for dozens more hours of this. This is open world Dynasty Warriors is a horrible idea. And that game is like, I think probably the worst reviewed in the series, so I think I was right. But no, Wukong is extremely strange. Like, you launch into like the opening area, and you're just like in the woods, and it's like you probably, I think you might have beaten like one shitty practice boss before they open you into like the more open woods, where there's like, it's just like a formless, shapeless mass of trees and nature and rocks, but you can't really, there's no sense of what direction it's like facing or what the directions you can go in are, besides the one forward direction. And they want you to explore and check all these side paths, but it's unclear what the rewards are for even exploring. And all the signposting is weird and wrong. Like, there's invisible walls everywhere to stop you from going certain ways, but you also, half the time it'll seem like the obvious way forward. like the river just ends in like a depression that you can even knock enemies down, I think, but if you try to go at it, you can't go down it because there's invisible walls. You can't go to the base of the river that seems like it
Oh
has
my God.
secrets. Like it's full of stuff like
Yeah.
that. But like,
So
and like the logic's fucked because like you'll fight a giant nightmare blue baby, which is just so fucking hard for the beginning of the game when you have no abilities and no health and everything. But right past it is like a big archway leading into a temple with a guy that has voice acting that you can hear from outside the temple, and he looks really important and menacing and like a original character Do Not Steal, and he's standing at the back center of the room facing you. So you're like, this is obviously like some kind of multi-health bar important boss fight for the story. I better do the baby first. Not only, but like, and it's true that the guy in the chamber is mandatory, but if you fight him, you unlock the ability to transform into him, which is a fucking, like, at the time, game-breaking, difficulty-destroying a mechanic where you just turn into a different character with an entirely separate health bar for ages and get to just play as them and don't have to worry about how much health and everything you have. And that trivializes the baby fight, but most players I think are going to put off that fight to do the baby first because that's like the optional one, and you don't know yet if you can come back when you finish areas. But like, no.
So I have thoughts about this. So the way that I described Wukong to people, like after starting playing it, is that it's like a game designed by aliens who have heard of video games but don't know what video games actually are. And I think a really good example of why this is just the misconception that this game is a Souls-like. And that sounds like a weird thing to say.
Because superficially it has like an Estus flask and bonfires, and then that's kind of where it stops.
Yeah. And I think that this creates an incorrect expectation for how this game is meant to be read and played. And what I mean by that is, so like you go up to this blue baby, the withering white or whatever it's called, that Keith is talking about, and your Elden Ring sense. You went into this big Chinese game that they're going to be the big new Souls-like that everyone's excited for, and you see this big demon baby, and I think the game designers want you to think, oh, Elden Ring, Tree Sentinel, you come back to it, so if I can't beat it now, I'll come back to it later. But the problem is that the rest of the game isn't Elden Ring. So this logic falls apart the second you actually think about it, because this is a linear level-based action game like a Devil May Cry or a God of War or a Ninja Gaiden. It is not a Souls-like.
Okay, that's what I thought. Watching Keith play, I was like, wait a second, this is a Souls game.
But it has like Zelda. It has a Souls-like style, like quest structure.
Yes.
Just implanted over.
But like
like you're teleporting through Devil May Cry 4's map, like with a teleporter for some reason, even though it's set out like Devil May Cry 4, but you teleport through it because there's just like NPCs throughout it that you have to do quests for and intuit what order to do stuff in, and you'll like get stuff in chapter 2 that unlocks secrets in chapter 1, but it's not signposted. It's not signposted as a location that has a secret, and the item that unlocks the secret also doesn't indicate in any way what the thing could be. Like at one point in the opening area, there's a waterfall, and you're like, okay, it's a waterfall. Those just exist. In chapter 2, when you get a specific item, it allows you to go back to chapter 1, go to that waterfall. You'll hear a weird voice for some reason, but there's no reason to revisit the waterfall, so you're not going to hear that by happenstance because it's way out of your way. And then you go through the waterfall and fight a dragon, and now every chapter has a dragon behind a waterfall, except chapter 3 where they give up on that premise, and he's just in a random direction for no reason. And that's like, it becomes like a campaign spanning quest chain, but it's not like a reward for finding the secret in every chapter linearly. You have to specifically come back after chapter 2 to start the series, so you can't even do it like by just being perceptive the first time. It's like deeply unhinged design.
Some of these dragons are hidden in places that are not well signposted. Like so I have a thing about this game that I have like a whole diatribe, but it's going to take the whole fucking podcast to do. So I think that this game has like a serious issue with adding mechanics and ideas without like doing the work to like make them make sense. And what I mean by this is that it's a game built in shorthand. So you play other video games and you learn how game design works from those other video games, right? You go, oh, okay, like I have a strong attack and I have a heavy attack. So clearly I'm going to combo from I have a light attack and a heavy attack. Clearly I'm going to combo from the light attack into the heavy attack. This makes sense. And so the game just like doesn't try to communicate this,
right?
The
game's completely dependent on you already knowing video games as a concept while also not really being built within the ecosystem that those games are from. So it's not readable as one.
Yes.
But you also can't tell which games it's cribbing from. So like, you're like, oh, it looks like, it kind of feels like Sekiro. Maybe there's a parry, but there's not a parry. But if you go into the skill tree, one of the skills is a parry, but it's not described as a parry. It's described as like an upside down waterfall whooshy. And then you're like, what the fuck does that mean? And then the description cites several words you don't understand, so you need to check other skills to find out what those words mean, and then give up and Google it to find out what Reddit says those skills mean. And then finally you realize that one of those abilities is a parry, but it only activates when you have 1 bar of energy, sometimes mid-combo. You have to use a heavy attack mid-combo when you have a bar, and sometimes it activates a red state that makes the attack not hurt you, and then you do a counter attack, and I will never learn how it works.
Yes. And I
that's
think
the parry.
part of this problem...
It's just as good as the Mikiri counter.
Yeah. I mean, part of this fucking issue is...
People regularly review this game saying it doesn't have a parry because of this.
Yeah. There's so much stuff to talk about here because of how this game functions. And
it's hard to even approach.
Yeah, it's deeply difficult to even approach because there's so many issues. But I like to create a very comprehensive argument here, pseudo video essay-ish argument. Like one of the biggest problems...
It's called a podcast, not video essay.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying on the fly here.
But the secret to getting people to watch your podcast is to title and thumbnail it like a video essay.
Like a video
essay, yeah.
Further destroying the market.
I think perhaps one of the largest issues with Wukong comes from the fact that as a player, right, you go into this game expecting one thing and it consistently doesn't deliver what it is saying it's going to deliver. And kind of what I mean by that is, like Keith mentioned, you start the game in in like an open world, not an open world, but like a big open level, like a big forested area where you would ostensibly be exploring and running around and looking at other enemies and trying to figure out how you're going to do stuff. But that implies that the game wants you to explore.
And which the game implies, because like we should mention the most unhinged part about your introduction to the first open area is they turn you into a bug and say, go explore this. You're flying around and because Wukong TFs, because that's a thing from that's all of his versions of his character. Like that's important, is that he TFs into things. So like he turns into a little flying beetle and you bizarrely like start flying around like a drone in like as like a third person zoomed in flying beetle with completely different controls, and you're trying to figure out how to control it, and you're trying to navigate this world, and you don't really know what you're trying to explore or where you're trying to go. They just let you loose in the woods, and then it just runs out and pops you out back into being a monkey man wherever you happen to be with very little warning. In my case, it was directly in front of the blue baby, so I just dropped directly into a boss fight with no warning. And then that never happens again, and like you don't like you didn't like unlock the ability to like turn into a beetle at the beginning of that chapter over and over again to keep like checking it out and seeing what it does. It just happens exactly once with no warning, but not for long enough for you to actually explore, and then doesn't happen again until like chapter 3, where it's where at that time it's not exploration, it's a fucking on rails cutscene that lasts 10 minutes where you just fly through mountains and have to watch. So it's like it's not a mechanic, but it's your introduction to the open world, but it's too short for you to actually explore, and it's also not setting up the idea that you can be a beetle.
Well,
just the language is fucked.
yeah, well, like a really good example of that is just like that mechanic never comes back again. It isn't like a thing. It literally is just in the game because I think it's a power that Wukong has in the Journey to the West novel
Yeah.
from the 1300s.
Isn't a lot of this just because the context isn't like deep enough in the West? Like,
No.
it just sounds like it sounds like they're just cutting a lot of corners and adapting a story that they're not providing context for.
Well,
the
yeah.
the struggle is that it's just thrown in there because it happens to be in Journey to the West, but it doesn't serve
that's
a
what I'm
narrative
saying.
or mechanical purpose. It just blindsides you with the segment, but it's not like a cutscene of him transforming into a bug. It's you being told to explore as a bug, but having no exploration goal as the bug, and also not having time to actually adjust to what's happening, and then the bug never happens again.
It also doesn't benefit you at all. And the thing is that like this it's not just about it not having context, because you don't get anything out of it and it doesn't serve a purpose. It literally is like, even if I had the context of Journey to the West and grew up with this culturally, the bug moment is pointless. It doesn't mean anything. It's not valuable.
Literally the feature you hear about in documentaries about video games. So like, yeah, we had this fun thing. We turned into a bug for a bit, but like we never figured out what to do with it, so we cut it. But then they didn't cut it. It's just there for no reason, vestigially, to confuse the fuck out of you as somebody who thinks you know what games are. You're like, why am I bugged now? It's over. I don't.
Yeah,
and so
I just
can I do it
I
again?
meant like
Why would I do that?
Yeah.
Why was that there?
Okay. Makes sense.
The weird thing with this aspect, though, is that the exploration issues don't stop with the bug. So, like, even if we just accept, like, okay, this is like a PS1 game where, like, you turn a corner and do a weird mini game and it just never comes up again, how charming. It's not that. The issue is, even if you do what I did, which is you transform into a bug and then immediately go, this is stupid, I want to play through the level, de-transform from the bug, never become a bug again, the game design itself diegetically does not value exploration. So what do I mean by this? This game has the worst case of invisible wall-itis I have ever seen in a video
that's really
game.
bad.
It's really terrible. So a really good comparison point, because everyone is going into this game expecting it to be a fucking Souls-like. So thinking of Sekiro and Elden Ring, the two games it is most often compared to, you go to an area and you see it, you'll be just like in an open room. Like, let's just say like you're in an open arena. There's a waterfall on one side and like a pretty looking tea house on the other. And then like an obvious critical path you're supposed to go through. The tea house has a staircase leading up into a big open main room. So you think, I'm going to go there to explore because I want to see if there is an item here. Like any obvious game designer would do, you would put an item in the optional area that is not the critical path to reward the player for engaging with the game. You walk up the stairs to go into the tea house, and you are hit with an invisible wall. Even though the fucking tea house is open, it's right there in front of you, signposted in the center of the arena, like a big spot the camera focuses on that you can go to. And the thing is that wouldn't be a problem in a vacuum, but that issue exists throughout the entire experience, and it transcends from just being about exploration into being about just raw mechanical understanding. So many times I am playing this game and something will like be signposted or will be shown with the camera. It like you'll be like flying over an area and the camera will like zoom over a specific enemy and then go underneath them and then go above them and show them next to a cliff edge. And you think, oh, okay, this is telling me this enemy is standing by the cliff edge. The fact that it's by the cliff edge is important. Why is it lingering and giving me this vertigo look of this enemy by this cliff edge? Okay, I must have to push them off or something.
And then you kick him and he just like hits the invisible wall and doesn't fall off.
Hits an invisible wall and doesn't go anywhere. Exactly. And the crazy shit.
That is until chapter 3, where suddenly people can fall off cliffs out of nowhere.
Yes.
Which you discover because they put a monster closet that pushes you off a cliff in the middle of the worst level you've ever played. Like, you're playing like the fucking Tower of Lake Tree and Nightmare Mensis fucking hybrid level. It's the worst thing you've ever seen in anything. And people just start shoving you off cliffs and you're like, you can fall off cliffs in this game. And so you're like 20 hours in this game and you see the death, the you died to falling damage like tooltip in a loading screen for the first time because it's never been possible. You're like, what the fuck is happening? What do you mean I can get pushed off cliffs now? I don't understand. You just changed your mind about the core rules of the game with no warning.
Yeah, the game is incredibly inconsistent about this too, because like even going into chapter 4, like the whole issue with falling off cliffs, there's like a tightrope mechanic basically. Like you'll run across like ballasts and beams and stuff, and like the game becomes clear like, okay, you can fall off of these. What is crazy is when it starts introducing extremely crowded ballasts and beams where there are enemies that can fight you on them. But the issue is your character magnets to enemies when you attack. So if you press the attack button, because there's no invisible walls, you fling yourself off of the beams and instantly die from fall damage.
Yep.
This game is
you have an astonishingly like
nightmare.
mobile dodge and an astonishing like every attack sends you flying in directions. So like when they start putting you in the fucking Anne Orlando rafters and shit, you sincerely can't interact with the game. Like, it just becomes about doing that part over and over again, hoping to get the timing right, because they'll have like an archer that's lining up shots on you, which is the easy part, is just dodging forward in the direction of the beam at the timing of the arrow, but then they'll have like a fucking like flying bat gargoyle thing whose whole job is to charge at you at odd angles while trying to launch you in directions, and like just anything will send you flying off the cliff, and these will be like in the middle of like a long Souls-like gauntlet of like, oh, go all the way back to the bonfire when you die situation. So it's not just retry that obstacle, it's retry the level every single time this fucker knocks you off a cliff, which you die of instantly. It's like bizarre design.
The thing about this too is that the game itself is not particularly difficult. The issue with the game is the massive amount of inconsistency from encounter to encounter, and even from like base mechanic to base mechanic. Every single time I think I understand what this game is asking me, something just stops working. This game has one of the worst cases of input lag I have ever experienced in a video game, and it's extremely inconsistent performance-wise. I am playing the game at low on a 4090. All right, I have a 4090.
You put all the graphics in it.
I literally turned the graphics down and disabled ray tracing and turned resolution scaling to 40% resolution so that I could get performance. And I still have to rely on frame gen to get 60 frames per second.
What?
Which is crazy because what people don't realize is that while frame gen is great for a lot of games, especially when you're at super high frame rates, the issue is when you can't hit fucking 60 in an action game and you're relying on frame gen to generate those frames, your inputs are still calculated on the base frames, not the generated frames. So because the game is running at 20 frames per second inconsistently and randomly dropping to 15, I will go to dodge something and my character will just stand still and get hit.
Yeah.
And wait, doesn't the input?
Yes, because your input is being
what happens
calculated.
Constantly is I will literally take like 5 or 6 separate attempts in a row to use the heal, and it still won't go. And then when I finally
won't go.
And this leads to you frustrating, like, okay, hit the button, I don't see an animation playing. Hit the button, I don't see an animation playing. And then inevitably this means that when it does read correctly, you double heal all the time. You're like, no, I really need those, please.
Yeah.
Because it'll queue up a second heal before the first one even started firing. And I'm like, no, this almost never works. Why did it work twice this time?
This is a particular issue with some of the inputs in the game. So Keith mentioned that you get transformations. You get 2 kinds of transformations. One are time-based and one are action-based. And
oh, God.
One of the spirit transformations you trigger by pressing right trigger and left trigger at the same time. This should be piss fucking easy. But actually getting this to trigger is a nightmare because left trigger does your staff spin and right trigger opens up your actions menu, your like shortcuts. And the way that it's supposed to work is you press both of the buttons within like a certain amount of frames of each other and it just overlaps the input and you just get the transformation. But because the game is constantly dropping inputs, if you are even a frame off of pushing them at the same time, it will just do whatever the previous, like whatever the non-overlapped input is. So I will sit there in a boss fight doing a combo and be like, all right, time to do my big fuck off damage transform attack. Oh my God, why aren't you doing it? Oh my God, stop opening my shortcut menu. Oh my God, stop spinning my staff. What the fuck is going on? And then I get hit and killed.
And that's before you get to the worst stuff, like hold left trigger and click right stick or whatever the fuck your like mantle button is. It's like the one for using your cape or something. It's like, what are these? What's this input combination?
And so this just gets to this idea that I mentioned before of like, this is a game developed by people who know what video games are and have heard of them, but have never actually played them and never made them. And this is where things get really complicated. And this is sort of where we talk about the issues with Wukong and like why it got praise and why it got hype and what its position in the market is. So Wukong is considered.
You're getting flashbacks to the other.
I'm getting flashbacks to the other fucking terrible wuxia game that I hate. The issue with Wukong is that it is considered China's first major AAA Western release. And that is true in a lot of ways. It is a non-gacha, single-player, AAA, massive budget Chinese game developed by a Chinese developer, heavily focused on Chinese culture and mythology. And that's fine. But
it's designed to be an undisputable hit in its target audience.
Yes.
So it's like very specifically like the equivalent of yes. That's why it's like, it's not like we made a random game about some guy with a gun. It's like, no, it's like specifically about
I get the branding.
Our shit.
I mean, like the game itself.
Yeah,
like that's incredible. Like the game does not seem like it would be appealing to anyone, but sure.
Well, but that's the thing is that
on paper, all the stuff that it's made of is supposed to be the things that people would like.
Are really popular
it's just
right
that
now.
It's badly made. That's a different topic.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, yeah.
The issue here, though, is that has been the marketing for this game this entire time. And so as the moment it was released, people were like, oh my God, or the trailer was released way back when, like 5 years ago or whatever. People were like, oh my God, incredible looking video game from China. What? Oh, what? This is crazy. Journey to the West, incredible. And so the hype started, and you would see people even back when the demo came out praising this game
that was
as
my
like
hype.
Chinese Sekiro, Chinese Souls, Monkey Souls, blah, 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 blah. And so people, like a lot was riding on this game, this idea of like, holy shit, this is going to be the big one for China, and that's a big deal. And in a way, this game really was. But you need to take this from the understanding that China does not have a developed game, like a game development industry in the same way that we do in the West. In a lot of ways, the Chinese game development industry is still in its complete nascency. Like it is in infancy. So they don't have the same base of knowledge and understanding of game development as an industry that like other countries might have, right? And that comes from their user base, that comes from their developer base, and that's not a bad thing. The problem is when you
play the game.
Yeah, the problem is that when you're cribbing design ideas and you don't understand how they fit into a greater context, this game suddenly feels like a student project that happens to have AAA backing and like the power of the Chinese government and propaganda machine behind it. And that's where you get to the issues with like reviews and with like company controversies and stuff. Cause like there was a lot of controversy around this game. We probably won't reiterate all of it here, but there are reports of like really extreme like sexual harassment going on at the studio, of like crazy shit said by the developers about women in games and women developers and stuff. Part of the press kit that was sent to people who were reviewing the game was like, you can't talk about political issues, which is code word for the Chinese government, or COVID. And you can't talk about feminist propaganda, which is code word for don't complain that the only women in our game are either evil or sexed up, basically. So like all of that exists. That's a big issue. And the game was propped up by culture warriors, especially right-wing Western culture warriors, seeing this game as like hitting back against the
especially
woke
when the press thing
propaganda.
says don't talk about feminism, and it's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah. And like that's all an issue. That's all problems with this game. But you then get into this issue of like journalists on the other side, also here trying to be like, oh my God, this is like a big moment for China, and xenophobia is like a big issue. So like, it's a really big deal if this game is good because
What?
it might be representation for people, and it might be important for people to play and interact with like an underrepresented culture in video gaming. And then you also get the people who want to avoid death threats from the right wing people online who are arguing that this game is the second coming of non-imperial Western Jesus or Eastern Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And like, that's like a problem in and of itself. And you also get to the issue that this game just fucking sucks and isn't good to play. So many reviewers didn't beat it before the reviews came out. And this is where we get to the part that pisses me off the fucking most. In chapter 3 of this game, not only does the gameplay dive off a cliff of consistency, the translation becomes pure nonsense.
Oh no.
One of the biggest issues with this game is that, and again, this is another they've heard of video games but haven't played them problem. This game gives you lore entries, like item descriptions and things like that, for every single enemy you beat. And I have had the great displeasure of reading all of them. And
Why would you do that to yourself if it's bad?
Here's the thing.
It's sincerely exhausting because you're like, oh, look at these nice little. It's like a nice little fairy tale about the Journey to the West stuff and what's going on with this particular enemy, and oh, it's a little morality tale about like judging things, or it's actually really hard to parse the moral sometimes, but
Yeah.
or sometimes it's a poem. But then like
Yeah.
like in throughout the opening levels, like every time you beat a single enemy for the first time, another story pops up that's like takes like multiple minutes to read.
Yep.
To the point where like the opening hallway of a chapter might have several, and you're like, oh, let's take a 5-minute break from reading these, and then they start stacking up. Like, I'm never catching up on these. Oh no! Every boss has another one. Every like individual minor enemy in Recolor has another one.
Yeah, I've read all of these on stream, and so I have issues with their content because the content of them is non-actionable information, and in fact, it's often irrelevant and difficult to understand if it is actually part of the game's canon or just a random excerpt from Journey to the West that I get to read as context, like non-diegetic context, right?
There's weirdly hints of which ones might be copy pasted too, and which ones might be written, because like the entire formatting of the writing changes.
It changes, yeah, and
That's
an issue in and of
ultra jank.
itself. I have an issue with this because Elden Ring, like using Elden Ring lore as an example, Elden Ring lore is arcane and obscure, and like there's been a big push towards people really liking this in video games, and like I think for one that like lore can be really beneficial if you are engaging with it and making like the context and the understanding of this stuff actionable. What I mean by that is, for lore to be important, you need to be able to understand something through its context. You cannot do this in Wukong. There really is nothing to gain from reading these lore entries, which means
like
they're just fluff.
The softest layup versions are when you beat a boss and you unlock a story about that exact named boss with a picture of that boss drawn in the old style and everything, and you're like, okay, this must be the story of that boss, right? And then you read it, and you're like, I don't know if I can reconcile that with the character that in the game I played.
Well, like
I don't know if I'm supposed to
like
even think it's the same person.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like the big example that I think of is just like there are entries in here that are like, all right, I just fought this like big tiger boss. Let's read the lore about the tiger boss. And then you read like a 6-paragraph story about how the tiger boss, like he was living with his father and his brothers, and he ate rats for a living. But at the end of his role as a general, he was murdered in battle. But the thing is that this is ostensibly lore. And it's
like,
saying,
didn't I
this
just murder
happened?
him? Wasn't he alive till just now?
Yeah, like
is this Dark
part
Souls
of the
rules
story?
where people just come back forever?
Yeah, like there's just no logic to it that you can't really parse. And then on top of that issue, like that's my issue with the content of the stories and like their placement in the game. What becomes insane is that in chapter 3, they are literally Google translated. So on top of being fucking nonsense that you just don't get anything out of, they straight up just are illegible. Like you can't parse them. They're full of like weird translation grammar. where so like one of the sentences I read, I'm going to paraphrase to make it up, but like because I can't remember the exact one, but it will say things like, the sword master went to a beetle to talk to him. He then went to save him from him, but then he did this and he said it was okay. And it becomes clear.
If it's okay. I mean, it was just.
And then it becomes clear there that the he is actually 3 different characters.
Yes.
But because in English we have pronouns, and in other languages the pronouns are much more distinct, the translation falls apart because they're just translating them into base machine translated English.
They're not actually localizing it and not fixing the huge gaps here. Yeah,
and the grammar
they will constantly
nonsense.
just spam you with he and whatnot, but also they will not do the English way of writing where when a different person speaks, there's a new paragraph every time. So like 3 different people will speak in the same paragraph, and because they hate feminism, everyone's a man. So it's just he and then he and then he, and they're not even doing like the thing that I do. Like fucking when I'm writing, because I'm a furry.
Yeah, you can make it stylistic.
Well, it's like, because I'm a furry, when I'm writing, I'll be like, okay, well, everyone, too many characters are male in this fucking scene, but I can refer to like species, and there's multiple words for each species and stuff, and they have furries, so they could be doing that too. But no, they'll just stick to he. So you genuinely don't know what's happening in the story.
Yeah. It's just awful. And like this level of inconsistency is something that literally no one talked about prior to the game's release. And I'm not seeing people talk about it now. So my big conclusion from this is that people have not beaten this fucking game. And the few people that have beaten it are the diehards who are overlooking all of the issues because they have like another stake in the game that's motivating them to want it to be good, whether that be right-wing propaganda, fucking anti-feminism, anti-woke bullshit, or just the desire to see Chinese culture represented in a underrepresented industry like gaming. And like as a result, no one's fucking talking about this game.
I think that mainstream reviewers also kind of have a tendency post Gamergate to just give like softball bland reviews to like hot button games and just not really get into it. Like, I was paid to play this game for a week and write 4 paragraphs. Fuck it, who cares? It's like it's neat. Wow, can't wait to see how their industry develops. You sure do action at them, and then you don't write anything, and then you don't get into these kinds of things because you don't want to get doxxed.
I mean, this shit has been happening for years, even outside of Gamergate. I mean, this is just like the Zelda curse. Like reviewers can't give Zelda games less than a 9 out of 10 because if they give them a 9 out of 10, people will be like at their doorstep trying to kill them. Like that's just like the way that it works. But I think in this particular case, like there's just people hyped this game up as a million different things, and it is none of those things. And the game that it is just really bad. It's just a really bad game. It is incredibly inconsistent. It feels terrible to play. None of the mechanics make any real sense. It is just feature bloat after feature bloat after power creep. So here's like a really crazy fucking thing. You need 300. The level cap in this game is 342. The game has skill trees for basic abilities. So you need like 330 levels to just max out the skill tree. And when I say for basic abilities, I don't just mean for like big benefits. You need to go through the skill tree to get things like you can do a heavy attack after a light attack for a combo in an action game. And so this game has an obscene amount of grind where you have to go back to levels and grind them. Note again, this is a linear level-based game where no exploration. So you are just going back through levels to grind them. You spend the first 10 hours not sure if your character works yet. Yes, and he doesn't. Wow. The max level cap, 342. The reason why it's 342 is because in Journey to the West, Sun Wukong's life is written into the Book of Destiny as 342 years.
Oh,
okay, that's cool. That's a fun reference.
So, but the thing is that you don't design a game around this.
So they were contriving levels to add up to that.
Yes, they added grind into the game for the purposes of cultivation, a Chinese genre that is inherently grindy and tedious. which
Oh no.
sorry guys, I don't care if
that
that's
just-
your culture. That's just fucking annoying. It's just fucking annoying
Yeah.
and doesn't tie into the rest of the design of the game,
At
which
least
is
make
a
an open world
linear
survival simulator or something, not
Yeah.
an action Souls-likey thingy.
even
That's
if
like,
even if this was an open world game, a real ass open world game where you had reasons to go back to places, this would be valuable. But no, I am sitting here right now grinding cocoons to get sparks so that I can cultivate my fucking skill tree so I can stand a chance against enemies
he's
in this
still
game.
in it. He's
literally
hating
doing
it
it
while
right
trapped in
now.
it.
I am sitting here right now grinding mind cores so I can make celestial medicines so that I can
Yeah.
create pills to increase
there's
my
so
skills.
many grinding systems. Yep.
It's like a fucking gotcha game with the amount of random mechanics. And this
I
actually
can't
gets
believe that.
to another issue, which is that this is a game by a development studio that has not made any games other than fucking mobile gotcha bullshit. Why are
Oh.
people
It's like, so it's
celebrating
like
this
designed.
game?
It's like designed to waste your time.
Because people love that shit, don't they?
no,
Like don't a lot of people love Genshin Impact or whatever?
No,
It's just
people
a
love
gacha
Genshin Impact.
grind fest.
I mean, people
No,
do
they
keep
don't
playing
like
them,
the
and
grind fest
people do
is the
constantly
issue.
play them, and then tweet all day about how many pulls they got and stuff. And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
no, why are you in the? Why have you let it into your brain? Why are you doing
Yeah.
this? And then your fucking friend's entire Twitter feed is just images. Their entire media tab is just screenshots of a gotcha game. I'm like, stop! Why?
Yeah.
You can play that same game without the gotcha mechanics in like 10 other places. Just don't.
Yeah. So the thing with gotcha games and the thing about them that makes them the way they are is that one, people don't like gotcha. They're addicted to gotcha.
Yeah.
The thing
I
the thing
mean,
about those games though is that they have mechanics that people like, and most gotcha games, the thing that keeps people around is that they're designed like web comics. You play them so that you get to see the weekly update and you get a little bit of story for a wooby character that you love and want to understand.
A wooby care? I have never heard of that term.
Like a wooby,
Yeah,
like your
woobies.
favorite, your little cinnamon roll,
Yeah,
your little scrunkle,
your little guy.
Like,
I've never heard
Yeah,
it called that.
I've
but-
never heard of that.
yeah, that's like an actual term that people use.
Yeah.
I'm sure. It was just.
I'm sure, yeah.
But
And if you're in
the
an
thing-
OC space,
yeah, so like the big issue with this is that the gotcha is the barrier to that. In Wukong, this is a single player, linear, level based video game. So doing what is basically tedious Korean MMO grinding mechanics just to waste your time doesn't make me feel better about like I'm spending time with my characters, or like, oh, I like
he's
I
not
don't even
calling the
get
game Korean. He's just saying that like when you play a Korean MMO,
It's like a
they're-
Korean
they're
MMO.
horrifically
very grindy.
grindy and
I mean,
farmy compared to
I
like
don't know,
wow,
just-
Yeah.
Okay.
So like the
Black
problem
Desert
here,
Online.
yeah, the problem here is that all it's doing is wasting your time. I don't even get the enjoyment of getting a gotcha pull that makes the screen shiny when I level up. All I get is the pure abject horror that my skill tree is 200 more levels deep and I have to spend 8 more hours grinding to get my stamina bar 20% higher. Like this game,
My heart
is a
sank when I
disaster.
saved the fox boy, and I'm like, look at the fox guy. Oh, he seems friendly. I want to see what he's up to. And then you find him in his den later, and he's like, I'll help you upgrade things. I'm like, oh, that's nice. A new upgrade system. That'll be helpful. Thanks, fox guy. And then you see, and it's like, oh, he makes he makes pills that increase each of your stats by like 1%.
Yep.
And you can only, and there's a rare resource you have to farm to get them, and you're capped out at getting exactly 10 of each upgrade.
Yep.
So functionally it's like, oh, this isn't a fun perk or a customization. It's all of your stats get 10% bigger, and you have to do a massive amount of grinding or so on to actually unlock this. And if you don't do that, you functionally just haven't finished your character. So this is not a fun secret or a perk or customization of character expression. It's a chore that you have to complete, or the whole game will just be 10% harder.
And the crazy shit about this is that I'm on chapter 4. I have all of the armor that I can possibly craft at this point in time. I have all of the weapons I can craft at this time. I've like maxed out the first set of my skill tree so that I have like all of the damage bonuses and I have all the damage bonus pills as well, I still feel like I'm hitting enemies with a fucking Q-tip. Like
Of course, it's only 10%.
Yeah, it's
and the skill tree
crazy.
just gives up too. Because like at first the skill tree is like every single one of these little pips is a new ability, and they only cost 1 or 2 points each, and then they're all complementing and adding new mechanics and depth to the previous abilities. But eventually they're just like, here's a massive star cluster of things that just increase your stats in very minor amounts, and you just need to keep pouring stats into them, and it's one for every
2
stat.
levels each, and
and then your transformations
grind.
also need to have their stats leveled separately in a separate tree, and it's just like, oh, these are just the tree just gives up, and it's like, here's 100 entire points or 200 points just of flat stat increases.
Yeah, and then don't forget the other menu where you upgrade your spirit transformations using a different bespoke currency that is a rare currency only dropped from rare enemies.
Oh no, everything about the upgrades is actively a betrayal. It hurts me. Because like what they do is, so with the core skill tree, they let you refund it at any time, so you can actively experiment and change what you're invested in and so on, which is good because you get stuff like the pole stance where you're like, this is literally not viable unless I can literally fill this out. Like if I just unlock this and try it out, I can't even tell what the purpose of it is because it doesn't function. So you can respec that whenever you want. But then it does the ultimate betrayal, which is that it corrupts the thing that I praise about Zelda and Dark Souls, which is that like in those games, like you get your heart pieces, you get your bottles, you get your magic meter up, you get your Estus flask shards and your bone ash or whatever, like the bespoke, unique upgrades that give you permanent progress in your character that are based on exploration or completing quests or bosses and so on. And like, okay, so like you get, in a similar way to Dark Souls 2 and Elden Ring, your flask in this thing, your gourd, has 2 separate main upgrade items that you pick up throughout the game. One of them increases how many heals you get, and the other one increases the effect of the effect of the particular gourd, which is already immediately a struggle because like the first flask heals you by 30% of your health bar. The second flask you separately, like you get a different gourd that you can switch between that gives you less healing, but then larger healing over time instead. So it's like, ooh, it's laid. That's an interesting choice. Then you realize that the upgrade thing that upgrades your gourds has to be used on a specific gourd. You can't just upgrade the concept of gourds. You have to upgrade a specific gourd, which means you then have to just choose one and stick with it because it's a super rare resource.
Yeah, with a limited amount.
Yeah, and then it's even weirder because like it'll specify some of the upgrades and not specify some of the other upgrades. So like in the case of the 33% thing, it'll be like, okay, this thing heals you by 33% of your health bar, right? If you upgrade it, it'll heal more. But then the other one heals you by less of your health bar, but then gives you a non-specific amount of healing over time. And that one can be upgraded to heal you more, but you don't know how much. But also the first flask requires 1 upgrade material to upgrade, and the second flask that does heals over time requires 5 upgrade materials to upgrade. So you don't know what the cost benefit is between the 2 prices there. And for the like 20 plus hours I played, I literally could not get the resources enough to upgrade the second flask that I was saving up for instead, because I thought that was maybe the cooler flask. And like, the game has not introduced any way to refund your flask upgrades, so unlike your skill tree, you're just completely invested in the stuff and you're fucked. But then I'm like, okay, well, at least there's this much, at least there's a resource that just upgrades how many flask uses you get, and there's only one pool to put that into, so at least I'm safe there and I can safely spend those. But then after spending a bunch of those, it introduces a second pool of upgradable flask uses that you have to do separately.
No.
And I'm like, no, I already invested these, and now I have. Now you're telling me there's a separate option for these, and I have to know which one was the better one. But I already spent them, and I don't know if I can ever get them back. And you're like,
no,
what the fuck is this?
Again. The goal is to come back to the game and play it
it's
again.
New Game
now
Plus.
That you know.
It's just so deeply cursed to just have like the game.
No, it's a game.
I've talked about this.
This game feels exactly a Chinese game.
But I'm just saying, like I've talked about
the more you tell me about a game that sounds like it. Can
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like I've talked since the beginning of time about this fucking shit about like Zelda and Dark Souls, where it's like the whole point is that when you get an Estus flask shard or a heart piece, you're like, it's this specific upgrade. It makes me feel good immediately because I know what it means on an emotional level, and I know exactly why it's an upgrade. And it's an uncompromised 100%. This is good feeling. Like you need to know this is what it like when you pick the whole reason why it feels good to pick up a heart piece is you know exactly what it does and what it means and it's permanent and unique and you're like yes. But the moment you turn it into like Skyward Sword bugs and you're putting bugs in your wallet, you don't know what the bugs are going to do in the long term. You're just picking up bugs mindlessly. Like you don't care when you pick up bugs anymore. And so like it needs to be an uncompromised good feeling and not this mess of what they turned it into in this game, which is that they took the Estus Flask upgrades and turned it into like this terrifying decision paralysis thing where you're afraid to spend it ever because you don't know if you're ruining your entire playthrough by spending it, and now you never feel good when you get them because you don't even know if they're good or if you're doing them right.
But
And
can you ruin your run? Like, can you actually ruin your run by investing?
I mean, the game is tough, so you definitely just run into walls where like from the beginning of the game when you hit bosses,
no, can't reset those
from the which itself is a betrayal because the skill tree is infinitely resettable from the beginning of the game, which sets you up on the idea that it's a game about experimentation and just spend anything you get and then you can get it back if you want and try it again. But then they do that with the healing system, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? You literally communicated to me that this was a consequence-free environment where I was free to experiment, and then you fucking rug pulled me on it. Why did you do that? Do you not understand that you're communicating things by putting them in the game?
Yeah.
And the answer
these mechanics come from other games too. Like the idea of this is like, okay, what if we took different gourds that do different things from like the idea of like judging your like which type of Estus you're using in Elden Ring, or fucking Lies of P's handle blade mechanic, right? Like the idea is like, okay, things are modular. This allows experimentation. People like this, but then you can, so the way the gourds work, you have the vessel for your gourd. You have the literal gourd that you're putting the item in that flavors not only the amount of uses that you have, but like certain effects of the uses. That gets its own upgrade, but then you also have the wine itself inside the gourd that you can upgrade, and every single wine, of which I have 5 currently, I think, are all on their own bespoke track that do their own things that all cost different resources to upgrade. And then on top of that, you have soaks, which are little knickknacks you put in the wine to get different effects on top of that. Which is the one
completely free modular thing that you don't get punished for using because it's literally just equipables. Yes.
But those are also incredibly insignificant. And the idea is that some of these will like have synergy with different wines and gourds, right? Like you have a soak that like increases the amount of mana refilled when you're at full health, but only one of the gourds refills mana when you're at full health. Like that's the kind of synergies that the game is trying to set up, but you're actively disincentivized from experimenting with this because the individual gourds and individual wines that you would want to synergize with cost hard upgrade materials to make
so inherently you're hard specializing in one of them because you need to keep upgrading it to actually reach endgame like upgrades instead of like spreading them all thin and then just having basically level 2 everything and then having to beat the game with that. Because it's not like, because all the whatever you've upgraded that you're not currently equipping is functionally just upgrades you burned. Yep. They just threw them in the garbage because you're not using that exact item right now, so the upgrades don't affect your gameplay. It's deeply
completely
cursed.
Irrelevant. It's so bad. It's just one of the worst games I've maybe ever played, and the fact not only that it's getting good review scores is an embarrassment, but the fact that there's this much fucking hubbub in the culture war about a game this fucking terrible, it's literally, it reminds me of that game, that like Hatred game, if everyone remembers, from 12 years ago.
Yeah.
That got like banned on Steam, and people were like, we're getting censored by the woke mob. But then when people played it, it was just like a Unity asset flip that no one liked. Like, it's just
like a shit tier dual stick shooter that's like we've already played 100 of.
Yeah. It's just so
but also
bad.
You couldn't see anything because it was grayscale.
It's just one of the worst games I've played ever for the channel. It is as bad as Wukong, which similarly was this bad. Like Wukong is this for Souls-likes. This is just this for bad action games. And I would have thrown this game in the garbage. I genuinely, I am not the type to be upset about having to spend money on video games. I kind of just believe that games cost what they cost and it's whatever.
Yeah,
and like
and you're like, art, here we go. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
that good. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, okay, like I got my money's worth out of it. This game, I'm actively upset that I paid money for it. Like I'm actively angry. I will
Yeah.
never buy a game from this developer again. I am going to outright dismiss all wuxia games because I am now 2 for 2 on shitty wuxia games that people hyped up before they released as like the next big thing. And I can't be fucked. Like I cannot be fucked.
And this
into
isn't even an anti-wuxia thing as a genre.
That's
We
why.
repeated
No.
because periodically we'd be like, what if we had a wuxia season of no playing games?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting poisoned on it anyway to begin with, but like it's just like
this
like
game's
the
killing
fucking-
all of
Finally.
the medium for you.
yeah, like
Finally,
it's
doing
it's
its job.
how I can't do it. Like it's terrible. And like at this point, like there's a new Chinese wuxia Sekiro like coming out called Phantom Blade Zero that people are really excited for. And
oh
I'm
yeah, I
already-
bet.
I'm already seeing people in like do damage control. Like the director of the games is cautioning players that it's not actually that much like a Souls-like. They're not taking inspiration from Souls. They're not taking inspiration from Sekiro. But then like all of the reviewers are like, I played a 10-minute demo and it's Chinese Sekiro. And I'm like, nah, this game is gonna be fucking Arkham. It's gonna be Batman Arkham Asylum with you press X to counter enemies. Like you can already see it in the trailer. This game looks
Oh,
janky.
no.
The animations look bad. I can't fucking
Give
do
it a
this
chance.
anymore.
Give it a chance. I'm sure this is good. This is the one that's going to put China on the map for video games. I'm telling you.
Is it
You
even
gotta
Chinese?
play it,
Is it even a
man.
Chinese game or is it just wuxia?
I think it's Chinese. I'm pretty sure it's Chinese. But I can't fucking do it. I can't do it. I'm gonna give their games
You
industry
can't-
another 15 years to bake, and then maybe we'll come back
What?
and be able to play something.
Look,
I
the
don't
Euro-
know, man.
the
I-
European
There's
gaming
logic. There's
industry-
logic to that. Yeah.
The European gaming industry took at least 10 years to get out of the sort of Eurojank reputation
What?
that it had. Yeah, yeah.
It still has it. They didn't
still
get
has
out
it.
of
Well,
it.
Don't get cocky there, buddy.
I don't think Eurojank went anywhere.
Yeah, you're
I've-
still there.
no, you're,
I've
no,
I've
that's
played
not-
I've
that's not
played
fair.
Elex.
Yeah, but those are small studios, and especially
And
a
they're
very
jank.
special.
Not even
a
your
very
small
special
studios
studio.
make fucking bangers. Come on, guys, get it
It's
together
also-
here.
It's also a very special studio that Embracer Group killed, but
Yeah.
because it's the folks from Gothic. Gothic was a rebel all the way through the 90s and the early 2000s. So what I'm trying to say is it is true. It's what Toaster is saying, that it takes time to get everybody involved in making games to be at a level of knowledge and sensibility to make games that they can even communicate with each other to improve a game on a design phase, or I say design, but even on a production phase.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
there's
it's like
so much
whenever
iteration
it's like
that
when
goes through.
news comes out about Nintendo and they're like, and the way that we made such good games is that we maintained a staff of people long term and we keep the same employees for decades
Yeah.
and we pay them well and we make budget games and it all works out, man.
It's
and then,
weird.
And then it's
We
like,
did this thing that
so
like,
imagine being in
founded all companies.
a
I
games
mean-
industry in a country where like functionally those employees almost don't exist. Like there barely is an industry. So you're like, who do you hire to do anything? And that's how you like.
It's
it'd be-
everybody's
Seniors,
fresh.
obviously.
But you got a few seniors to lead some teams, and it's inevitably seniors that are going to have.
It's just that you
an
pump
interesting
money into these
background.
projects, but you're constantly at threat of just pumping money into Mass Effect Andromedas over and over again because
Yeah.
like the studio, like you don't have a built-in studio environment to like
I mean,
facilitate
I think
these
that
huge
can-
projects.
I think Mass
Yeah, I
Effect
mean, I think the
Andromeda
obvious
was
problem
better
here
than
is-
than Wukong.
One of the things I'm going to say here about like Nintendo though is that like that is a little bit of a whitewashing of the actual historical reality of Nintendo development, which is that they outsource and contract a lot of their games. And
Yeah.
even Nintendo internal has made like some pretty fucking terrible games over the years. The thing is just that like with output, you get experimentation, and with experimentation, you get experience. And the thing with Wukong that is upsetting to me is that I could see a world where this game with its systems, even if I hate its systems, are well designed. Like, the issue with Wukong to me is not that like the ideas on display here are inherently bad. It's that it is sloppily thrown together, tied together with twine and garbage, and like it doesn't create a cohesive whole. It's just a really bad, shallow, wonky, generic, terrible action game that doesn't even feel like it has its own identity, because it's an adaptation that also is stylistically cribbing from other things, just en masse.
Yeah.
If you, in 10 years, maybe this team could make like a really solid game. I don't know. But like this, it's just an issue of like not having a codified design language and understanding and design philosophy that led to this, because this game is quintessential too many cooks in the fucking kitchen. Like I never played a game that has felt like it has less on the cutting room floor than this game.
Yep.
It's just every idea that someone had got into it, and that's not a good thing.
Like, I'm only in chapter 3 and combat is already deeply cursed, because like functionally it's like you're there to like you hit the enemy and you see their health bar not even move. It just vibrates slightly. You're like, okay, I guess they want to have a style where Sun Wukong has to do twirly like Star Wars prequel attacks and just hit their enemy a million billion times to actually take them out with his rapid fire attacks, because he's got his staff and everything. I guess that's the style they're going for. But then you see how little damage you're doing over the course of entire fights, and you're like, oh, they want me to use every single trick they give me. So each gimmicky mechanic they're giving you, like, turn into a fire wolf that has a fire glaive and his own health bar and his own whole duration, and like all these other like different mechanics, like summon the guy to do an attack for 1 second, like and then like even then Wukong even has this thing where he duplicates into a bunch of clones of himself when they all attack at once. Like, you have to rotate through all of those abilities as a baseline, and just to get a normal size health bar on the other end, essentially, to actually reasonably fight. Which means that every fight has like a solid minute of you using all of Sun Wukong's weird abilities the exact same way every time, in the most boring way possible. And like even when I'm playing it, I'm like, people are gonna think I'm boring and cheesing the game in the same way, like as if you summon in a Souls game or whatever. Like, they're gonna have that opinion about it. But I'm like, literally, if I don't summon a billion Wukongs to do for 10 seconds, then turn into a firewolf for 30 seconds, then fucking cast Ultima Meteor or whatever, like, and just go through all the phases of this process of softening the boss down, it's like an impossible health bar to get through. Like, which makes it just this deeply tedious process, because every single fight, now on top of having to run back to the boss fight and also try to learn the moveset and grind through all that stuff, you're also just having to sit through what is like the equivalent of like it feels like you're like putting Final Fantasy X Aeon summons into the middle of a action RPG where you actually have to do real-time combat without turn-based stuff. Like, you're essentially functionally going to cutscene mode throughout the fight, because you have to sit through so many of these separate things. And like, those are, every time they add one of those things, they're just a permanent addition to the combat that you then have to keep using for the rest of the game. And like, that's part of the thought process of why it feels like, oh, they didn't think about what to cut and what to keep. Is like, once these are in, you're stuck with them. And every time they add another one to the top of the pile, you're like, time to do that every single boss fight for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Like, please, I don't want to do it
And everything
anymore.
is on cooldowns. That
And
takes
everything
5
might
minutes to
not
cool
work.
down. And also costs mana, which is hard to regenerate. And like, it's just resources the whole way down. And the thing is that like, I love character action games. I have played almost every single one. I've beaten Bayonetta on Infinite Climax. I've played all of those games. Like, I love Elden Ring. I like games where the mental stack of combat is very complex. Like, I am not against needing to use every mechanic a game puts in. And this gets back to that thing that that Colonel asked.
It's
why am I reading these lore entries if they're bad? The reason is it's in the game. They put it in the game. It's part of the game. Playing the game necessitates interacting with that system. Otherwise, why is it in the game? This is clearly part of the experience. And I think this is part of the reason why people like are rating this game highly. A lot of people are playing this game without reading anything. They're just running through, they're mashing buttons, they're finding a way, throwing their heads at bosses and winning. And then they're like, the game is so good. The combat's so fun. bruh, the combat is 10% of this game. Like, even if you were to actually balance the combat being fucking awesome would be 10% of this game, because the other 90% is systems that people are ignoring. And it doesn't matter how much you fucking ignore them, they exist in the game, they are part of the game experience. It's not a good thing.
Terrible.
The combat is terrible, but it's not a good thing when a feature can be ignored. That is not. You should not be happy.
No,
when
you don't want to be
portion
Assassin's
of a game.
Creed Revelations, which introduces bombs at the beginning of the game, and I played the bomb tutorial, then promptly forgot bombs existed until after I completed the game. I literally platinum trophied Assassin's Creed Revelations, then pressed a button in like the pause menu and was like, oh, you can craft bombs in this game. There's like a whole multi-part bomb customization system. What were they for? I did everything.
If you're gonna put something in your game, it's gonna build up to something. Like, the entire point of designing a mechanic is to be interfaced with. No one wants their shit to be dummied out in the game, right? Like, that's why I read all the lore. That's why I interact with all the fucking grindy systems. That's why I do this, because ostensibly the game wants you to interact with them. And this is true of all games. This is why I don't like playing, for example, like The Witcher on easy mode, because as tedious as it is to fucking brew potions and deal with your mutagens, that's literally part of the game, to the point that they talk about it in fucking cutscenes. So if I go through the whole game not using those things because I'm on easy mode and it's superfluous, that's a flaw in the game. Like, that's an issue.
Game, that's the point. Like, if you read The Witcher, it literally opens with extended descriptions of like the bizarre amount of preparation that goes into a monster hunt, and the specific like chemical cocktails he's putting himself through, because literally what a witcher is a person who can take a bunch of fucked up potions. That's basically the lore of what a witcher is. And if you're not engaging with that system while playing the game, then you're playing like Dragon Age instead of a Witcher, and like the title isn't applying, and the reason why he's a freak that like, and it's ruining his life and nobody will talk to him and people are afraid of him, isn't even like on the table. He's just pale now.
And so, like, the idea of being scary, like, you don't need this stuff because the game makes it fine. You can just like beat it with like getting good at dodges. Like, that might be true, but that's not the game. That's a challenge run you're imposing upon yourself. And challenge runs are fun. I love them. But that's not the fucking game. And so what makes it even more frustrating is that the counterplay to ignoring these clearly crucial systems for leveling up is to rely on mechanics that are inherently fucking tedious and inconsistent in a game where like hitboxes and dodging are terrible. I cannot get over how bad this game's dodge is. It is without a doubt the worst dodge I have ever seen in a action game, and I've played Wukong, which is the worst feeling Souls-like I could ever possibly conceive, where you have to push a button twice to dodge.
Oh no.
This game is disastrous. I did a boss fight yesterday. I did one of the hardest boss fights in the game, and I was consistently unable to read when to dodge attacks, because sometimes I would dodge with the same timing and get a perfect dodge, and other times I wouldn't. And other times I would miss the dodge, and I just wouldn't take damage from a sword clearly cleaving me in half. I don't understand how this game can be as inconsistent as it is.
Oh, the
it's an
attacks are just actively
embarrassment.
bad. Like, I fought the giant sand beetle guy, and he would just not swing at me. He would clearly do like an arm swing of some kind in a completely different direction, nowhere near me, and then I would die. And then he would do, and even other really obvious telegraph stuff, because they don't know what games are. Like, he would do a ground slam, and a giant sand shockwave would go across the level. And universal language of all video games is when a floor shockwave happens, you jump over it and you don't take damage. So I jumped into the air and took sky damage. Just like physically, particle effect, very obviously get punched in the face by an attack in midair, way above the shockwave. Very clearly not like, oh, you jumped early or late. Like, I was at the peak of my jump and got fucking screen doored and died. I'm like, oh, time to redo this boss fight that literally has like an opening cutscene, a long grind where you do no damage, a long middle phase where he just keeps attacking you while invincible from underground, then another cutscene where the guy beats the drum, then another part where the rat joins the fight and beats the boss fight for you, but it takes like 5 minutes still, and you just have to watch him do the fight because you basically can't hurt him. That all has to get started over because I got killed in midair by a floor shockwave. And I'm like, I don't know if I can take this game. I don't know if I like this game very much. It's starting to fall apart for me. Like the game, the game can trick you into like a false, like a decently positive opening opinion. Because like while the mechanics are rocky, you're still like, oh, I don't have my complete character yet. I must have to unlock more stuff. And the beetle part was weird, but like this opening level is, while incomprehensible, is tiny and is full of bosses. So it's going to be a boss rush game, obviously, like Fury, where you just go from boss to boss and the levels barely exist in between. But then level 2 is fucking massive. Just an incredible amount of grind, of huge sprawling world and random and like increasingly like, oh, they have no sense of like how to establish like directionality to the stuff. There's no like BioShock lighting or like sense of like land, like there's no landmarks, there's no sense of what things are. You look at your list of checkmark, like every single bonfire you unlock is a teleport spot that's named in a menu, which is itself a nested drop down menu where they divide the individual chapter into multiple regions, then multiple bonfires per region, but you can't tell what any of them are because you genuinely don't know what any of these names are referring to because there's no like landmarks throughout the game. It's just more desert and more temples the entire time. And the entire chapter, you're fighting the same zombies, the same golems over and over again. So the entire chapter is sprawling with just like 5 enemy types for like 10 hours, and there's still an intense like density of boss fights, but now you have to deal with their idea of what a level is while you're between those boss fights. And so the boss fights are this highlight that is slowly souring because they're getting worse, but the level is actively dog shit. Like, there's no goals to explore for. You're not going anywhere. You can't tell where you are. And every time you go back, like in this whole second half of the chapter, you're like, have your checklist of things that you were thinking of that you wanted to go back to do, and all of them just loop back around to places you already found with no payoff. You're like, oh, it was just a second direction for no reason. The game is like chapter 2 is shaped like the fucking rings people put cans in for no reason. Yeah. So at some point, and it's not even like the Bloodborne ladder going back to Josefka's clinic. Whoa, I'm here now. It's like, oh no, this level's just pointlessly full of
it's a gigantic
paths
circle
that go nowhere, and half of them have to be on. You could just walk around, and half of them are massive time commitments to unlock. Like, there's a chapter-wide gating system for opening gates, but you might have just gone around each of the gate by the time you actually get to open them anyway. So then they just you end up opening them from the back to the beginning of the level for no reason in a game that lets you teleport anyway. You're like, why isn't, like, sincerely, the game would be better if it was just a series of linear hallways leading to the next boss fight.
Well, there's like a really good example of this with in chapter 3 with the like 10-minute eagle flight fucking QTE thing that Keith mentioned earlier. You go into this arena that's like this big open space that has like a house on one end and like a path, like a straight up path.
It's a big frozen lake area. You're like, what's the zone? I need to explore it.
So you get forcibly turned into an eagle, and then you have to watch a dumb cutscene as you fly to the next area, and then it unlocks a new checkpoint for you. But a sane person playing this game would go, oh, this is the critical path. There was a clearly signposted beautiful location to go to behind me. I'm going to warp back and go back to where I was turned into an eagle against my will and explore that area and maybe like get a cool item that increases my health. You go there, and the path is cut off by a fucking invisible wall after walking the whole way, and there's nothing there. That is the level design in this game. It's just huge, massive open spaces that are also gated.
Game would have opened that chapter with you climbing like a staircase with a clear lack of other options up to like a temple, and then doing the cutscene and being like, oh, that was like the introduction. I get it. But they gave you a giant sprawling area that you couldn't possibly have actually thoroughly explored because you didn't know you were going to be ripped out of it because that's never happened before. Because chapter 3 is full of you being ripped out of locations and sent to new locations without warning. So you don't know if you're supposed to explore it. And like, you know, the game at least sometimes wants you to explore, because they'll at bare minimum will often give you like a meditation spot that gives you a free level up.
Yeah.
But you have but the signposting is so bad you can't tell when you're done with the place. So you just run around mashing your face into invisible walls, up to including what might be a giant bamboo forest that looks completely open until you hit the random barriers in it. Like it looks, some of it feels like it'd be there to be like a Lost Woods maze. As like the invisible walls are supposed to be a mechanic that you're supposed to be navigating through. But no, it's just because they couldn't create environments that were shaped like levels. They just didn't. They just give you a playpen that you can't see.
Yet again, in a year where I have played Password, the worst game I have played this year is a wuxia-inspired action game that sucks really bad. So there we go.
These
It's
wuxia
worse
games
than
keep making
Password.
you give Password credit.
It's just so frustrating, and it's making me really cherish. So because I stream, right? Like I have Wukong in a stream slot, so I've been playing it on stream lately, and it's gotten to the point where I will record my compulsory required 3 episodes of Wukong that I need for a week. And then I'm like, all right, guys, bye. I'm going to go record something on my own offline. Like I just need to decompress from how bad this game is. So I've been playing like JRPGs, a thing I don't play on my channel because they're very, very annoying to record. Having to read like a bunch of unvoiced dialogue out loud is like exhausting to do. And they're not good for stream games because like people on stream want something flashy happening at all
They want
times.
to pop in without context and be able to follow where they're going, instead of being like, oh, this is hour 300 of a story I haven't seen.
Yeah. So I've been playing Shin Megami Tensei 5, which is a really grindy JRPG, but a pretty cool one. And boy, the numbers on those VODs are really good, which is really nice. And same with, I've been playing Visions of Mana, which is like a very mediocre video game from like a pure design standpoint and like mechanical standpoint. But God, does it feel like aloe vera on my scorched skin after playing Wukong? Like, that game has given me pure joy this week. Like, shout outs to that game. And also fuck NetEase and Tencent for closing the studio the day that game came out, because that game rules.
Oh no.
Like, I'm very passionately positive on Visions of Mana, despite it being just okay. Because
That's funny, actually.
It's just so brutal. It's awful. I mean, it's awful what I've gone through with Wukong, and playing a simple, fun, cheery, like action RPG that isn't incredibly terrible is like, that's enough for me. That's all I need.
You know, it's astonishingly bad. It's flashy enough that it'll trick people, and going forward, Wukong is going to be like one of my litmus tested for whether or not people have like developed taste for video games.
Yeah.
Or if they're just kind of like, or if they're like my character Jet from Null Playing Games that just like buys what people talk about and then it just accepts that's what they are and doesn't think any deeper.
Yep.
Like the person, just turn off your brain, man. It's like, I don't, because it's like nothing. Yep. It actively rejects you thinking about it on a regular basis. It doesn't understand the basics of design on a regular basis. It's just actively poisonous to play through. Every chapter,
it's a distraction.
In a normal video game that has chapters, you will give each chapter a unique flavor, because you'll be like, oh, this is the unique like style thing we were going for in this chapter, and that there are different eras of a thing. And there's a gesture at that in Wukong when chapter 2 opens with a headless guy with a guitar, just introducing it through a song, and then he just shows up as a motif throughout the chapter. You're like, oh, but the reality of Wukong is that every chapter is what horrifying, game-breaking, bizarre like left turn are they going to introduce. Because they just like have a new thing to show you they don't understand about game design, and it's just terrifying. It's like chapter 1 was just a little boss rush in a small grove, practically. Chapter 2 was this massive sprawling desert that was actively nonsense and made you realize, oh, they don't know how to make levels. And then you're like,
yeah,
maybe they'll reel this back in and realize that this was a bad idea, and because like maybe they developed the game linearly or something, and we'll be like, okay, well, next chapter we didn't make that mistake again. But chapter 3 is one of the worst things I've ever played, because like you go in you're in the snow area, and the thing that Toaster just said about the lake and getting turned into a bird and flying away happens. You're randomly on a lake, and you now like fight a big sky dragon, which Toaster hated.
One of the worst boss fights I've ever played. Bed of Chaos tier boss, straight up. One of the worst boss fights I've ever played in a video game.
I got lucky and beat it on my first try without much difficulty because I just actively it entered my attack range, and I staggered and stunned it, and it just fell apart. But Toaster was like in hell there, not because it's actively hard, but because everything in this game does kill you in like a couple hits, and this one I guess would just stay in the sky forever and not come down to fight you in your
so
melee
this is like
game.
A big ice dragon or lightning dragon that floats over an ice lake, and its gimmick is that it flies in the sky and you can't like jump and attack it. You have to wait for it to charge you. It has a gigantic charge attack with a gigantic like if you are in the hitbox at all, even if you're dodging, it will grab you, like that sort of thing. So you just have to be out of range of it. And so my attempts, I did fine. Like I wasn't dying to it just like hitting me and killing me. What was happening was I was getting 80% of the way through the fight over these grueling 15-minute attempts where for 90% of the fight, the boss was just floating in the sky, like not doing anything. And, you know, people in my chat were like, oh, you can use like the mantle to knock it out of the sky. It's really easy. But like, that's a thing on a cooldown. And so I would use it, and I would like, the thing would fall out of the sky, or I would.
Cooldown in this game is a more than a minute long.
Yeah, it's more than a minute long. So I would hit this thing, and it would fall, and it would stagger it. And so I would load into it with my heaviest combos, focus attacks, drop all my cooldowns on it, and do like a sixth, maybe a seventh of its health in one round. And then it would just fly back up into the sky. And even when it was actively attacking me, like you only get a window to hit it twice. And then you have to run using your stamina to chase it across the lake, while whether or not it decides to just sit up there in the sky again. So like my perfect attempt, the attempt where I actually beat it, was like this grueling, like 9-minute long boss fight where I actually only spent about 30 seconds cumulatively fighting the boss, because it just spent so much time out of range, and all I had to do was just kind of wait around. Like not even actively dodge things, just wait around. I do not understand why this boss was designed this way, or who allowed that to get past QA.
Yeah.
Like
awful.
Because like one of the things it's going for, and it might not always remember to do it, is that what it's going for is that when it's flying, it's supposed to do this like level spanning attack everything. Like here you have to like dodge all of these like danger zones because it's like lightning striking everything all over the map.
Yeah.
And which itself is a sign for the poor going forward, because like starting there, especially, increasingly every boss fight has like extended invincibility phases where you can't reach it or interact with it, and it also like starts just exploding the entire map. So it just covers the entire map in an extended period of like MMORPG damage zones that you have to dodge before they all detonate. And so it's just a period of like both doing the same mini game over and over again every boss fight, and the difficulty of that being dependent on how well you can even see the call outs for it, and because like eventually it's like we're like in a later fight they're doing like white-ish lightning strikes on a white snow mountain, and you're like, where the fuck is the damage? I can't tell what I'm supposed to avoid here. And increasingly every boss fight becomes even more projectile based instead of being like, do you fight in an arena? So it starts getting like just sort of starts losing its genre to an extent, and you start to really miss when you were fighting a big white wolf in a temple that just punched you a lot and then jumped on some roofs to menace you, then jumped at you again. Because increasingly you're just fighting like a floating thing that shoots projectiles everywhere, and you just have to suffer. And like it's like I got lucky because like in that particular dragon fight, I transformed into my wolf guy, and I summoned my billion Wukong clones, and they stun locked him so hard that he was half dead seconds into the fight. And then when it came back down, I pretty much just finished him off. Like it fell apart. But you can just be held ransom by these fights. But what gets worse though is that it's one of those fights where you win, but then you lose because you won. So you get knocked out in a cutscene, get kidnapped, and you wake up in this like nightmarish Tower of Latria place from Demon Souls, but while it's actively evoking, like extremely evoking Demon Souls and Bloodborne in various ways, like it is a big prison full of some NPCs and some inmate monsters, and you're going up the linear path full of falling hazards, and throughout it are patrolling guards that do insanity effects on you and so on. None of it has a logical flow to it and makes sense, and as you try to unpack what's even happening, you're actively being punished for even comprehending. And if you're thinking about what's happening, one of the only conclusions you can draw for a while there until it finally clicks is that the game's glitching out and like broken. Because like
there's a completely indecipherable level-wide madness mechanic that drains your health and makes you do more damage for like 60 seconds at a time randomly with no discernible cause. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my god. And it's like explained in the lore of like when you fight the boss, it's the boss that's causing it to happen. But while you were trying to make your way up through this place, like I was like fighting enemies and trying to read item descriptions and be like, okay, like what is it because a bell is ringing? Like what do I need to be prepared for? No fucking clue.
It's completely
Truly
non-interactive.
no idea.
You can't interact with this mechanic. And you're searching for meaning because like surely it must mean something. Like first of all, when it first happens, you're like, okay, you're walking along this that's like the whole level is like ledges. It's like a ledge on one side and then prison bars on the other side, and some of them are closed and have NPCs in them, and some of them are open and you can like navigate inside and zigzag through a second layer a little bit. But it's a bunch of close fights in very dense areas where whenever you turn your camera, your camera jams into the wall and mashes straight up your ass so you can't see the fight, and it's dark. And what this effect does is it turns the game monochrome and adds a blur to the screen and adds a vignette around the corners of the screen, so you actively can't see what's happening while the game's also jamming its camera up your ass, because it's a whole game that was all exterior environments and large planes suddenly wanted to do an interior environment and didn't change the camera system in any way to adapt to that. But then this effect goes off, you can't see, and you're trying to fight in a precise, deadly game against these enemies that will just shred you, and your health bar is draining, and it's not your current health, it's your maximum health. So that's like the scariest thing that happens to you in video games, is like, oh god, my max health is going down, how do I avoid this? Because this is like, inherently, you're like, that means that when that happens in any game, basically that's like this run, you're stuck with that much health until you respawn normally. So you're like, oh fuck, I gotta get out of this right now. So do I run over here? Do I get out of that? Is there a zone on the ground? Am I in line of sight of a certain enemy? And just to make you really fucking confused, the game spawns a bunch of winter lanterns just like in Bloodborne, and they have nothing to do with it. Or maybe if you kill all the ones in the level during the effect, it might end that, but the effect isn't quite long enough to make that reasonable, because everyone's a bullet sponge in this game, so it takes forever to kill the winter lanterns, and there's multiple spread out through the entire level. But at the very least, you being near them, or being attacked by them, or being in line of sight of them is not in any way related to whether or not the effect is happening to you. The effect just happens to you level-wide for intervals of time that happen to be when they spawn the lanterns, but the lanterns don't directly cause the attack while it's happening. And so, like, it's not about stealthing around the lanterns in any way, or interacting with the lanterns in a smart way to not be affected by the attack. Like, there's just unrelatedly, the level spawns this enemy when the effect is happening, and when the effect stops, those enemies go away, but you can't do anything smart while you're doing it. So it's agonizing on that level, and you're just trying to get to this level that we're like increasingly like the only sane thing I think any player will do at some point will just be, you have to just give up and start sprinting through it and hoping that it will end, instead of trying to interact with it or explore it or solve it, because like there aren't mechanics to interact with it. But like but they fill the level with exploration hooks. Because one of the most agonizing things is, like, they don't understand why Demon Souls puts, like, items behind gates on a basic level. Like, every Souls game will put an item behind a gate or up on a ledge to indicate to you, there's some way to get there. What's up with that? And, like, the game, they do it on the most baby instant, like, they do it immediately so fast in Demon Souls because they know the value of that kind of thing. Like, everyone will remember getting into Boletarian Palace 1-2 which is the linear, you're on top of you're on top of a wall and dragons are burning you level. And then, but before you reach the dragon gate, you see this like locked gate on your left, and there's a body behind it with a glowing item on it. You're like, where is that? How do you get to that? And that's like a mystery that they had to implant on you early to give you incentive to explore, so that you don't just run straight across the entire top of the wall and then beat the boss and leave forever. Because you'll be like, wait, how do I get there? And so
that also trains you to play the other levels like that.
Yeah,
well.
like it trains you to like then be like, okay, well, each of these like safe spots on the wall, there are like these staircases that go down to another layer, and there's all this other depth to this level. This level's 3 times as big as I thought it was. Like that's like every From Software game pulls that trick constantly so that you know there's more to explore, and they're only getting more sophisticated with how to hint at that kind of stuff. And like like Dark Souls 1, the Asylum, immediately at the beginning, there's a broken staircase on the left side of the Asylum that you cannot get up, and there's an item at the top of it, and you're like, how do I get there?
Yeah,
and that's implanting the fact that in the distant future you're going to be able to come back to the Asylum from in a different way, and then you'll finally like scratch that itch. The Elden Ring tutorial area has a locked door in one direction and no way of unlocking a door, and it's like, oh, I can come back here after the tutorial. Like this is just the basics of what these games do. So in this nightmare, worst level in the history of video games, and hopefully the worst level of Wukong, but I don't trust Wukong to not have a worse level, and that's why I can't play it anymore. I can't play 30 more hours of a game that might have a level like this again. I can't do that to myself. There's an NPC in the cell directly next to where you start, and you talk to him, and above him is a glowing item, and you can't open the door to the NPC, so you're like, oh, you must be able to like navigate, because the level, every time you go deeper in this level, there's staircases that take you to the next floor, and there's crumbled, incomplete, like it's a big circular level where you're on the inside rim of the outside circle, so it's like you're always facing inwards towards the middle of the level in a big circle. And so you're like, okay, you're navigating in a big circle, and there's each floor has chunks missing out of it, so you must be able to drop down from a different floor onto that platform where the item is taunting you to, and then there will be like a passageway into the NPC's chamber where you can open the gate from the inside to free that NPC, and like that's how you do this particular quest, right? Or at the very least, the fact that there is an item up there means there's some reason to go there, or the item itself is so valuable that it's worth trying to figure out how to get there, and that's why they hinted at the beginning of the level.
Jesus.
So I go on this massive path to find this thing, because that's what the language of the game has told me to do. And after tons of trial and error, because you can't tell where you are ever, because once again, there are 0 landmarks. The level is a circle, so every floor is a circle, and the middle of the level is just a big spinning idle thing. So you can't tell whether you are with relation to that either. So you can't tell what compass direction you're in. You can't tell, like the quadrants aren't color coded or something. That there's no way to orient yourself. After finally finding that part on the floor above you, to finally find how to get down to that item, you drop down and it's like 200 souls or something. And there's no passage, and it doesn't go anywhere.
Nice.
There's no passage that leads you to the NPC. There's no direction
it's a dead
it goes
end
to.
with 200 souls?
Yes, the item is worthless, and it's not hinting at a deeper part of the level. It literally is just a little ledge that's above where you start. So it's like, what, a shortcut back to the beginning of the level in a level full of bonfires you can teleport between? So there's no reason to ever want that?
Probably. Yeah. Sounds
Like,
about right.
Sincerely incomprehensible. This game is made by aliens. Like, they don't know what video games are. It's
if you were taking the game seriously, that would be the game telling you do not explore, because you're not gonna get anything out of it.
But why would you tell the people that? Just don't make a level that encourages exploring. So it's like, like the game. The more you think while playing it, the more you'll hate the game, because like the part of you that, like, if you like exploring in Souls games because you're like, oh, what's over here, what's over that, and I gotta unpack this puzzle box of a level, the game spits in your face for trying, but still doesn't know not to hint at the idea that you should do it constantly. So it constantly does stuff like that. Like that was a very memorable moment, but I experienced dozens of moments like that, of like trying to find the specific thing that the game was hinting at being valuable and or a worthwhile exploration, or at the very least a satisfying exploration moment, and it actively not being that, while filling you with agonizing mechanics and the worst enemies and all this nightmare shit happening to you. Because I'll remind you, this is still in the level where I'm losing half my health every 60 seconds and nightmare shit's happening. And this is also still the same level where they randomly introduced that you can fall off ledges now. So it's full of like catwalks that you can get pushed off of randomly, then have to start the whole level over again. And here's the funnest part. Here's the part where I was saying, like, here's why you think the game's actually literally broken. The fucking effect that makes you lose your health, it does not transition in timing based on you respawning. So, if you die while it's active, you will respawn back at your bonfire, and it will still be active, so you start this run with reduced health, and it's still actively happening to you. And if you rest at the bonfire to try to skip it, no, it's still happening. It's happening based on a real-time timer in real life and not the game state. So you dying and resetting does not change whether or not you're currently stuck in the madness phase. So it'll just keep going.
It will pull you out of the fucking shrine too, because you're losing HP when you're standing, when you're supposed to not be taking damage.
So your opening experience with this will be that you'll be exploring this weird prison, wondering what mystery and intrigue it's going to have for you. You talk to this NPC that doesn't want to talk to you, and then the Winter Lanterns spawn, and they cause madness on you, and you're like, oh, that thing, they must have done that to me. I gotta avoid them. But then when you die to the Winter Lanterns, you respawn, and the effect is still happening. So you're like, is the game bugged? Because that's your only thing you could think is like, is the game bugged? Because the game's still freaking out in the state, even though I died and respawned. Like, no, the language of Souls games, but also the language of like every game, like, doesn't do that. That's not how any game works. Like, it used to be that every game was that you died and then you got a game over and respawned, and it was a hard reset state, period, and you got all your consumables back because you literally, like, that everything that happened last 5 minutes didn't count. In Souls games introduced continuity from life to life, and like, oh, your souls are still where you left them, and you got to go get them back, and consumables you lost are still gone, and so on. And this game does that, where you lose consumables even if you die. But also, stuff like this doesn't change the world state. Like, it used to be that, like, in a Souls game, when you rest, the world state resets. And in this game, when you rest, the enemies respawn, which implies the world state has reset, but the madness state does not reset. So only some stuff resets, because they don't get the basic language of, like, what even resetting the world at a bonfire means. Even though it's a thing you manually do by clicking the button that says... Because they let you do the bonfires without... They let you access the bonfire menu without resting, so that you don't have to actually reset the state just to access your, like, extended inventory or whatever. So you have to manually click a rest button that says that you, like, this will, like, pass time and reset the game state, and enemies will respawn, but you'll get your flask back. And that does not reset the insanity thing that keeps doing Winter Lantern until the real-life time limit goes away, which is invisible. So you just think the game's broken. You think the game actually broke and died.
Yeah,
which is the
but then it gets worse. It gets worse. Don't worry, because when you get to the third bonfire in this level, or the second bonfire, I guess, because the opening area doesn't have a bonfire. There's a little pit behind you. You can fall in, and it's like, and you're not sure. First of all, you're not sure if this is a safe pit or a death pit. But if you're adventurous, you'll experiment. And the answer is yes, no, because it's a fall damage pit, but you do survive it. And there's a boss at the bottom of it who is just a floating statue surrounded by corpses. And it's a bullet hell boss. It just spams energy attacks continuously. You cannot reasonably stun it. None of your attacks interrupt it or stop it from doing things. And it literally just spams, like, stuff like the affinity spell from Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, where it just, like, shoots homing projectiles at you continuously, and then it summons lasers across the entire level that spin and rotate like that Diablo 3 like hazard, and it's just an insane laser grid boss covered with projectile spam, covered with shockwaves and summons. It's just an absolute nonsense projectile attack game in the middle of your melee game. So you're like, what the fuck is this boss? And he does insane damage. Every individual attack might instantly kill you. Because, like, an attack will be like, here's 30 projectiles that can just all hit you at once. So you just die. And then start the whole boss fight over again. And this is still in the insanity level. So throughout your attempts on this boss fight, the effect that turns your health bar in half is just turning on and off at random, which also makes it hard to see, so you can't see the projectiles that you're supposed to be dodging. Yay!
Just wait until you get to the next level.
I won't.
Which is
because I
the
won't
worst.
play it again.
So imagine all of that, and then imagine that the next level you get to is a gigantic, completely vertical spider cave filled with multiple paths that lead to the same locations, but each with bespoke little items in them that you need to teleport in between to navigate, because once you drop off a ledge, you can't get back up to where you came from. And there's 50,000 holes to fall down into, and every single one of them is their own little route with their own little drops and items and boss encounters.
So you just have to keep starting over to check
And
every
you-
single
so you
nook
go-
and cranny because you don't know
Yes.
because you don't know which ones are going to have 100 souls and which ones are going to have like the thing that upgrades your healing item permanently.
Yes, exactly right, Keith. While also having bespoke NPCs and NPC quest lines
Yo.
hidden within those little
And
fucking nooks.
and if you don't finish NPC things, they vanish forever. But you also can't tell when you finished NPC lines or what they want from you. Like chapter 2 has the hot horseman, just a giant muscular giant muscular 12-foot horseman who's tied to a post suggestively at just head at crotch level, like just hello man. And he's like I'll get out of here, blah blah blah. He's just tied to a post. In that chapter, you read a journal about someone tied to a post that gets eaten. So you're like, oh, I gotta free this guy. There's no way to free him. You just have to like
You just
move
talk to him
on
and then
from
he's
that
fine.
chapter.
Yeah.
Like he never goes. He's just continually trapped there, and you just have to finish that chapter. And I guess he'll show up. I had to look it up online, and like I guess he'll just show up in future chapters, even though he's obviously not fine. And you obviously, in basic gameplay knowledge, the basic gameplay rules have to save him, or he'll be dead. No, he's fine. But all the other times, people will not show up again if you don't save them. But like fucking, I'm losing my mind. The NPC quests are incomprehensible. I wanted to die. I just increasingly just wanted to die. In chapter 3, like that upsetting bizarre laser boss was my breaking point. It was the first boss fight that I just gave up on and just left. I'm like, I'm not fighting this thing. This thing is evil. I will only come back when I have 1 billion stats and will just cheat at beating him by being too strong. Because I can't look at how awful this fight is. It's evil. It's actually evil to look at. Like, I hate this creature. So I continued on through the boss fight, and at this point, it's just like, I'm broken. I'm not going to read codex entries anymore. This game's lost my respect. I'm just going to try to push forward, and we'll see if it ever, like, becomes an acceptable game again. So I get to the top of this temple, and I fight the Death Stranding boss. It's the fucking... It looks like those four-legged creatures from Death Stranding, like the bosses from Death Stranding that showed up throughout, and it has a face made of lasers. So it's a big four-legged creature that's made of black in a level that's black, with some gold accents, and you have to. It has once again an extended phase where it's completely invulnerable, which can activate at any time. So you might literally use your like attempt defining cooldowns, and then it might literally go into a phase where you can't hurt it, and then you just waste all of your cooldowns because you already activated them. And one of its many attacks is that it will just cover the entire room with lasers where you can't tell even if they hurt you or not or what their effects are. But then it will just like fire a giant beam out of its face. And you're like, okay, it's facing a direction, right? So that means that I need to get behind it or under it, and then it won't be able to shoot me, right? No, it'll shoot it directly out of its face through its own ass. It'll just shoot backwards out of its own face if you go behind it. So nope, you can't learn intuitively.
That's fine.
That basic gaming knowledge. That doesn't work. Okay, then what's this other attack? Oh, it shoots a continuous beam at its face, and then it flails its head around. So it's shooting a beam, and your goal is to dodge the beam, but you don't know where the beam's going to go or when, because it's not doing the basic game design thing of being like, oh, I'm shooting a beam continuously. I will now move at fixed rates in different directions, and you have to like figure out where I'm going and dodge me. It'll like, it just does like the equivalent of like a first grader with a flashlight going like, this is the flashlight game. If I shoot my flashlight on you, I win. And then it just go with the wrist and just flashlight the room. It's just doing that. That's its attack. It's fucking evil. Like, just cruel, gross stuff. And once again, it's not, like, impossibly difficult. So, like, I get through this fight, but this is not a fun fight to do attempts on, because all the attacks don't respect me, so I don't respect them. Like, they're evil, cruel, gross shit. But my breaking point is that you finish this and you once again get voiped to a new location. You're now on the back of a sea turtle that is an island. And on this island is a dragon. There's a floating lady that uses lightning attacks or ice attacks on you, or ice dragon attacks on you, who turns into a dragon sometimes and spams those projectiles from before. But now it's on an ice mountain that you can't see anything on, so it's more projectile spam instead of anything that's fun to fight. But like, even that wasn't my breaking point, because I was like, okay, that's not a fun fight. But over here, there's an optional fight, and it's this series of dragons you've been doing every chapter. It's that one that you had to start by doing the secret waterfall that made no sense. And this guy made me quit the game. And it's one of those cases where I'm like, if I did more attempts, I could get him down. But there's been too many things that just where the game cannot be respected or expected to like have basic telegraphing or understand how attacks are supposed to work. And I can't do this anymore, because this guy was a dragon man with a sword. And at the beginning, he's just a whatever fight. But halfway through the fight, he charges his sword with lightning, and then he just starts one-shotting you. And like, it's like, and it'd be one thing if he was like big telegraphed attacks you have to carefully avoid. But like, one of his attacks that he just dashes forward, and you don't know he's dashing forward until the moment the dash starts. And he doesn't swing his sword, he just kind of spins in midair. It looks like he's dodging, basically. Like, he just dashes forward like 20 feet and kind of gracefully like twirls while he's doing it. Like, he spins like the way like a missile or whatever spins. Like, he's spinning like on the axis of his nose. And that's like whatever, right? And he's like, he's limp-wristedly like lightly holding his sword while he spins, and it carves a graceful little arc behind him, and it's a cute little animation. This attack does full sword damage with no telegraphing or warning, and it can cross the map at any moment. So I will just watch my health bar, which was full, and he'll, without warning, do this little woo. 80% of my health bar is gone immediately. Just boom.
What?
Like enough that I have to heal twice. And you only have at this point still like 5 or 6 heals total. And this guy is once again a nightmarish infinite like health bar boss, where you just like have to beat on him for like 10 minutes to get this incredible health bar down. And at any moment, with no warning, he might just do a little woo, and your health bar is basically gone. No, uninstalled. It's literally like unfinished content, like basic game. Like, that's not a boss fight. You can't do that. You cannot have a fight designed like that in your game. That's unacceptable. I can't accept the game having that, especially after having just suffered through that nightmare zone that I just did for the last 2 hours. It was such a continuous low point of content for so long, where everything was irredeemable continuously for hours, that I'm like, no, that's it. I'm out. This is like, I am the guy who has suffered through so many things on my channel and be like, nope, I'll grin and bear it, because like, you know, like, even if people don't like the series, the people that are still watching are the people that don't like the series. And if they don't like the series, they would have already stopped watching. So these videos aren't for the people that don't like the series. Like, I will finish every game I don't like all the time and get through it. But Wukong, like, made me dread playing any more of it. And just knowing that it's like this, this is where the extravagance plays against it. Like, knowing that it's this like upsettingly expensive, like show off game that wants to have an infinite content and go on forever. And like, you can tell based on like the structure of like the relics you have to reclaim to become like the proper legacy of Wukong, that you're like, oh, there's at least 6 chapters to this game or something. Like there's like 5 or 6 major relics, and then like probably some kind of finale at the end when you're fully powered or something. So this game's going to be long, and every chapter so far has gotten longer than the previous one. And I'm only in chapter 3, and immediately it's like they're out of their good ideas and it's the worst shit I've ever played. No, I refuse to find out. Jesus Christ, never. I'm never playing this game. I'm not beating it. Why? I'm not even halfway through, and I'm already at like imagine if level 3, because like this is an infamous level, but in Dark Souls 2, imagine if the 3rd level of the game was the reindeer blizzard. Imagine that being like out the gate. You're like, oh, what's Dark Souls 3 like? Oh, what's the you go? Let's go to the Hades Tower of Flame, and then Hades Tower of Flame is the fucking reindeer blizzard. You're like, oh, I'm uninstalling Dark Souls 2 and never playing it again. Obviously, like the reindeer blizzard in Dark Souls 2 is a thing you can only. They didn't really get away with it, but they could only get away with it, us continuing to play the game when you've already played dozens and dozens of hours of Dark Souls 2 and know that they never pull that shit. So this is a weird whoops zone that's optional in one direction that you never want to go back to.
It's like, easily the worst level in all of Dark Souls. No, hands down.
Whereas
so bad that I didn't even know there was a boss.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I finished it, I guess.
Yeah, you genuinely can't. Yeah, like that level's so bad in Dark Souls 2 that without looking it up online, it's not even clear if there is a destination in it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, there's a double tiger in here somewhere?
I never
How am I
actually
supposed to
beat
know that?
The double tigers.
Luddenzalen's brutal, because you have to do the run every time through that area, which itself is like, that's one of the worst levels I've ever played also, and it's genuinely brutal to have to do it in the context of like optimizing your run through each time to like learn the navigation. And on some level, when a game's built enough trust with you, a Souls game can be mean to you in that kind of way, and it is kind of like it's not necessarily good, but it's akin to like Waterfowl Dance with Melania. It does create like a unifying cultural moment for the players. We're like, remember that fucking experience we all had to go through? But like, in the case of Wukong, it puts the worst content ever. Yeah. It puts the worst content ever on the critical path up early. So it'd be like as if you played the fucking like vertical slice like intro of BioShock and it featured you playing the worst content of all of BioShock's franchise. And you're like, well, I'm not going to play BioShock then. Why would I keep going? So anyway, that's why I canceled my playthrough of Wukong.
Don't continue playing BioShock.
If you want
the first game and to cancel.
If you want to see the rest of Wukong, you can watch it on my channel and experience my misery and my slowly declining.
Go subscribe to Toaster Williams on YouTube.
Yes,
and Twitch, and salve his mistakes in continuing the game with money and ad revenue.
I currently have like 4 videos going live a day. I think it's like 3 or 4. So there's lots of content if people want to see stuff.
I mean, you guys really hyped it up. I am definitely down to check it out. Like,
this is I mean, we've hyped it up for the opposite reason. There's people that will want to see this happen to him.
It's funny
guys,
because
it's not even that interesting to watch visually. The game is just a fucking like vomit of things happening in very high detail, and you're like, that's
don't unsell a Toaster's playthrough in the same.
I'm not unselling. I'm unselling the game. The game is both visually and like actual experience wise dog shit. It's a bad game. Like
people are excited to watch my mental health slowly deteriorate. I mean, they've been watching Password for 100 years now, and
yeah.
Wukong is just more of that, except it's me crying to my chat instead of crying to Keith. So it's like, it's fine.
It makes me feel better knowing that this happens to you on its own. So it's not just my fault. So like, I can't single-handedly take credit for your downfall.
My chat is convinced that I don't have fun playing video games, like that I secretly hate video games, because the past few that I've played on stream have been brutal challenges for me of just like just absolute exhaustion by the time they're over. But don't worry, I like video games. I'm playing games that I like as well. It's just Wukong that's really bad. And the
Right
series
now.
like isn't getting viewership. Well, I mean, I guess it's about roughly the same viewership that all my other vids get, but like, yeah, I don't know. Wukong is a nightmare. It's a nightmare of a video game.
It will be forgotten in like 6
It won't
months,
be,
and that's great. It
unfortunately,
will.
because China has a lot of buying power, and this is part of the narrative too.
What?
Is that like so?
Get ready for sequels.
Wukong is the biggest single player game to ever hit Steam. It had the most concurrent players of any game on Steam.
Right now.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely
you didn't know that?
massive. Yeah, because it's part of the culture war narrative too. Because people will be like, "Oh man, we owned the SJWs with our anti-feminism game. It's the biggest hit ever," and so on. And those people conveniently ignore the fact that like 80 to 90% of all players are in China. Like it is not actually a big hit outside of China.
Well,
like no one.
China needs to step it up because right now it's below banana, and
below banana.
that's pretty.
It's called
that's
Russia.
pretty pathetic.
It has Banana's a game. So the thing here, it's like Cookie Clicker kind of. But yeah, no, the peak concurrent player count for Wukong was 2,415,714 people, which is fucking bananas.
So it came in second place. PUBG still beats it, but Pal World came in third. Okay, come on, guys.
No,
right.
but single player. Single player is the important aspect here. It's like the
Pal World is also single player. I'm saying that like
Pal World's
not
multiplayer.
single player.
I don't think it is.
It's not.
No.
Pal World's multiplayer.
Yeah, it's like Ark, right?
Yeah.
That's like half the reason people put up with it is because they're playing. This is playing with their friends. Yeah.
Yeah, and outside of concurrent players,
it doesn't even.
Just run around and shoot Pokemon together with your guns.
Yeah.
Oh right, I think can't you?
And then you build your base.
Were you thinking of a different game?
Shoot Pokemon more.
No, I keep forgetting that people are dumb. How
could you forget?
I forget the lower level of
that
society
mean?
exists. I just kind of like gloss over it. I forget there's like people willing to tolerate that kind of shit, and then actually have a group of people willing to tolerate that kind of shit. So it's like I don't think that, like, I assume the people that play Pal World are pathetic, but then I don't assume that there's enough people that would together be pathetic. If that makes sense.
The thing is that everyone played Pal World, statistically speaking. Like even the people you respect and trust played Pal World.
I didn't.
Wow, that's
yeah.
I mean that's good. That means
like
a lot of people lower than I thought.
But like that's the thing is that people get caught up in hype and then like games get big. Like Wukong is responsible for the highest peak concurrent players on Steam of all time at 37 million people. Like there's like Wukong is massive, but the thing is that it's massive.
That's crazy.
It's massive partially because most of its players are in China, which is an underserved market where there aren't any other games releasing, which is, you know, they've never had a game like this. Of course it's going to be huge, but that means that we're going to get 1 million more sequels to this shitty game.
Okay. Good. Make 100,000. You know what? I hope you go bankrupt making a bunch of Black Myth Wukongs. I don't give a shit.
They're obviously not going to go bankrupt because it sold really well.
Sure, but I'm saying like at this point, what does it matter, right? If you're legitimately playing this game and having a good time, and you're not in a isolated, localized, like a firewalled country, then like I don't know, man. That says a lot about you. If you're in the West and you are considering this a worthwhile a time, like okay, fine. I hope the rest of the games you play for in humanity are that low quality. I hope you just enjoy a circus of garbage. like what? There's no way that you could be playing this game for longer than an hour and tolerate it legitimately with having access to other games. Like there are other games that you could just buy right
people
now.
With really low standards. They just don't expect more. They don't expect fights to be good or levels to be designed. And I just
good. I hope they all get to experience bad shit for the rest of their lives.
I mean, half of them are putting up with gotcha to begin with.
But the thing, Andrew, you're also like there's a dynamic here, and I don't want to shit on anybody's taste like you are right
Mhm.
now. Although I
do.
sort of agree.
I will gladly shit
Yeah.
on anyone's taste.
Yeah, I
Get
will
better
gladly
taste.
Mostly,
shit on
mostly
anyone's
because
taste.
I haven't played Wukong, so the dodging of the bullet
don't need
right
to.
now.
Yep.
Yeah, but you're sort of like people play shitty games and have a good time because they don't have better standards. But those same people, when they do play games that are good and also have a good time, they don't appreciate those games to the fullest extent that they could be appreciating them,
Correct.
because they don't have the capacity to do that. It's the same. The reason
I wouldn't say
they can play
capacity. It's like
Wukong.
vocabulary. Like
Yeah.
you don't have.
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah. It's
context.
not like a
Yeah.
genetics kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's just
no.
they're not practicing.
No, they're not smart
Yeah.
enough. It's okay. You could
They're
say
not-
that.
But it's the same reason why you play a game in your childhood and you didn't like it, and you go back and you like it, or vice versa. It's because you develop capacity to appreciate things in a different level, in a sort of a deeper level. And especially for kids, that like, and not even kids, like just young adults as well. Like unless you're really nerdy from a young age, you're not gonna have developed a media analysis strong enough to be able to learn by playing shitty games. You're gonna play Wukong and you're gonna be, this is fine, this is fun. Games are like this, and and if your friends are the same, you're gonna be in the same environment. So,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say,
that doesn't change reality. Like they're playing a game that is absolute shit. They're enjoying.
yeah. But when they do
shit.
play a game
Like, you
that's
can't-
good, when they do play a game that's good, they don't. It's not like it stands out to them.
Yeah.
To people.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I mean, that's totally fine. I'm not asking them to have better taste. I'm not asking for them to have a better time. I'm hoping that their time in perpetuity is bad. That's what I have
But
requested.
the thing is that it's
they-
not bad because they don't have the context to know that it's bad.
Yeah.
That's fine.
too, yeah,
They
yeah.
don't have to. Again, they don't have to know whether it's bad. They won't know whether it's good or not. The point is that they're playing shit for the rest of their lives, and I want them to be stuck there doing that.
No, but the
I don't
problem
want
is that them doing that does alter reality because they're propping up shit, and then all we get is shit.
That's
But
again.
I think that's
you're
just that's
forgetting.
just how things
Unlike
are,
you,
though.
I don't like video games either. I'm completely content
Okay,
burning
got
the
it.
forest.
Got it.
So that's the point
My
I'm making. Is that
mistake.
I'm looking at this list and going, you know what? It's fine. Let the whole thing burn. The top 10 of most played games should not have existed. And that is
Yeah.
fine. I am
We're just
like-
we are moving. I think we've talked, or at least I've talked about it about this recently in a podcast. But we're moving towards a 2-tier industry. It's the we'll have the games that are services and the games that are art, and that's just going to be how it is.
Is it? I feel like
ever.
it's just going to
Yeah,
be
'cause-
services. Art's not going to be
because games-
profitable enough to survive the cost to develop.
The
Art
thing is
never
that art-
profitable.
Yeah, art is a luxury that people spend money on,
Yeah.
including extraordinarily wealthy people who do things for vanity projects. So art will continue to exist. It's just going to be
It's just be
fewer and far
underground, or
between.
few-
yeah.
Yeah.
But well, yeah. So okay.
And that
mean-
doesn't happen as much with cinema and with television, simply because of how technically challenging it is to. Well, I say
Yeah.
technically, but I mean, as an artist, as an actor, or as a director, even as a camera technician, there's just so many barriers to entry to you making a movie.
Yep.
That you cannot get through to making a movie without involving some form of artistry.
Yeah.
Where video games are not quite the same, mostly because the act of playing a video game is such a huge part of the emergent experience. It's not just sitting and looking at it like a movie. So even though movies are commercialized and you can tell that they are commercialized, that the landscape of movies is very influenced by the market.
Yeah.
It's just inherently harder to create for a 2-tier movie, even though it sort of exists. But yeah, for
The film is
distinct
just it's very productionalized even on a distribution standpoint. So it just there is so much more to getting a film in front of people than it
Mhm.
seems. Then like even compared to a video game. Like yes, you can put your films on YouTube, but then you're struggling with discoverability and
Well,
shit like that
that's-
as well.
I mean,
That's all
is-
complicated. There's a very, very big and complex web there. To creating something and putting it out there and with funding and blah blah blah. There's just so much there that makes that
Games were
complex.
similar in the past. It's just that games became much easier to access thanks to breaking down that distribution wall, where movies are
Yeah.
still not in that way. Like,
I mean,
No,
the
no, no.
other
Games haven't become easier to access. The bigger games
What?
have become easier. Yeah. Because if you think of,
I think
because that's the
I think
it
all
ties with
games
the-
are easier
Well,
to
he
access
mean-
now.
I think he
like
means
it was so
develop.
much harder.
on an individual
even-
level
oh.
for sure. Like
Oh, you
as
mean
a
make
person.
them? I thought
No,
you
no,
meant
no, I
no,
mean-
I thought you
wise.
meant develop because I was like, what are you talking about? Otherwise,
No,
No,
it's
no, no, I
I
meant-
think it's
I mean
easier
as
to
a-
access games than ever before. I can go to multiple different marketplaces for different varying types of games, where before I had like one game store in my town.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the only way I accessed games.
That's
Like-
true on an individual level, but on a
Yeah.
on a game
a
developer
massive level.
Yeah,
I
on the-
guess.
from the other
I'm just
side-
thinking like I've experienced more art post like Steam than I had prior ever. Like it was so much harder to find artistic games when retail stores were the only place to buy games. And then once the internet
Yeah,
happened, it was like, oh yeah, now I can just find a bunch of good games all the time.
But
That's
at the
cool.
same time, any publisher that wanted to reach you, they had the specific pipeline
One
to reach you.
vector. Yep.
And right now
Sure,
they can't.
I guess.
Unless it goes viral, it doesn't reach the target audience sometimes. Because there's
mean,
no
Oh, you mean like
the communities are
algorithmically
broken
or something?
down. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. You're
Yeah,
just
I mean-
talking
I mean-
about like natively, right? Like you just naturally find something.
Yeah,
Discoverability is like the big issue.
Yeah,
there.
discoverability. I'm talking about that.
Yeah, because you're not looking, you're not actively searching for something you want. You're waiting for something to come to you. Okay.
And the market
see
and the
what you mean.
marketing that needs to be spent to reach certain audiences is out of whack with a lot of the profitability of smaller genres. Like for example, if you want to make a Sims a Sims knockoff that's 2D and cutesy and things like that, there's no way to make it profitable unless it's free to play and it's mobile.
Yeah.
And you need and it's free to play to sustain the marketing side of it. Otherwise, and even then, I imagine there's probably a lot of barriers as well. Although I'm not inside I don't know how the mobile games market works in those details, but it just pinholes.
It just works.
Yeah,
Bottlenecks.
is bottlenecks. Yeah, that's what I mean. It just bottlenecks a lot of the
there's a lot of
possible
genres that are completely tied to a very specific monetization strategy, and that's like
Yeah,
the only way that they exist functionally, and that's like the struggle. Like how every single CRPG for 10 years was a Kickstarter project by the same three
exactly.
companies, or like how every single furry visual novel is a Patreon-backed like monthly release structure where they're trying to create stuff in builds where you're writing a story linearly because it's like the only reasonable way for that particular group of people to like get the assets together to like get the art and the production to like make the thing each time. But that's inherently like a flawed way to write a story and release it, because it means the lack of revision and a lack of like being able to like change things as you go, or unless you do end up doing that. But, like it's inherently, it's not great to release a story in chapters unless it's already written like a season of TV. And like a variety of seasons of different genres have their own monetization strategy and release strategy that is like permanently affects like the production of the game in a way. Like I'm literally like right now I'm doing busy work in Critter Cove while we're doing this podcast because I have like I'm reaching, in my case, the end of the like I'm reaching towards the end of the early access like viable content, and I'm trying to like squeeze blood from the stone and do like the last things that I can do for video content, but that requires me to do like really hunker down and take care of more of like the long-term goals that I haven't quite finished yet. And so I need to like do a bunch of tedious stuff there. And like, like this is a whole genre that is become built around like, it's like we release like a template of a game in early access, and it's just kind of like a sandbox of half-finished mechanics and ideas. And you hope that with a combination of developer time over the next 2 to 5 years and like audience like feedback, that it then coalesces into eventually being a game that like makes sense on some level, and maybe it won't. And you just kind of, that itself is like the actual like, that's Ark, that's Subnautica, that's like almost every game in this entire genre. And it didn't have to be that way, because like Miasmata was an open world survival game that I I don't think was an early access, or I think it precedes the early access like wave, and like
It does, yeah.
and just like that,
Greenlight, I think.
and obviously there's visual novels that don't release on a monthly Patreon support thing, but like the basic like the financial reality of and the context in which people have to create art ends up creating these pipelines where entire genres become associated with specific styles of monetization and development, despite that not being seemingly an inherent connection you would draw, and that just becomes the fact of the genre essentially. Yeah.
I think there's one other aspect of this that's really complicated that we're not really talking about, but is really obvious to anyone who's listening and has experience in film. Another big difference between film and games that makes film a little bit more resilient against economic conditions for the sake of artistry is that film is extremely heavily unionized as an industry, and gaming is not. At all whatsoever. Period. End of sentence. And that kind of the fact that we have like a heavy unionization in film and in creative, like visual creativity, is like something that really insulates random bullshit from happening. I mean, obviously bad movies still exist. I've worked on plenty of them. And bad movies get released and shit. That's fine. The point is that like artistry does persevere when you have structures in place to insulate artists from market conditions. And that's not to say it makes it easier to get artistry done, but you at least it can exist in a way that like game studios can just get shut down before their games even release, and then their publishers just release them anyway, like because of the will of the market. Like that, like there's just like no protection at all, and it allows things like this to happen. But with regards to Wukong and like how this relates to Wukong, it's just there's like a really good example of like a studio that just is given a ton of money in import because of like what their game represents rather than what it is. And that's just like a disaster. It just is a disaster video game.
A disaster video game.
I think they'll figure it out in Wukong number 6. So I'm
I
excited.
will
Wukong.
never play another game by this developer. I think I'm done.
I don't
with
think
game
Their
so.
next game is going to be an MMO.
I think you'll be
with
back.
Exactly the same problems.
I mean,
I will not be
wouldn't-
back. I'm not. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't have reason to try again.
The hype will get you again, one way or another. It'll sneak its way in.
No.
there, find
I
you,
wasn't hyped.
break
It was
into
just
your
a
home.
game on the release schedule that I thought would get viewership, and then no
I'm
one
pretty
watched
immune
it because
to hype,
everyone's
yeah.
playing it.
I don't
interested.
get particularly hyped about games unless it's very specifically, oh, it's the next game
I don't
from
mean you.
this developer with a proven track record that makes my favorite video games. Like that's the only thing I get really excited about. Like I'm interested in one like
more of the audience,
I don't know what you mean. Like
Chasing
like your viewers. Yeah, you're chasing views.
it doesn't get views.
Well, okay, yes.
So no.
Andrew's just saying this will happen again inevitably with some game that we
Yeah.
think is going to be a big
Yes.
hit, and it
Some
isn't.
mechanism or whatever. Well, I mean,
Yes,
that's not really
that's
hype.
all.
That's just the basic idea of being like, I don't know,
It's
man.
hype.
Maybe I'll like this game. Oh, I didn't like this game.
Well, like I
It's not
play
hype.
games.
I don't get
No, but
hyped
there
up for
is-
games. I
It's
literally.
not you falling
it's
for
just
hype.
my
it's your
job
audience
to-
falling for hype.
But you said it'll happen to me.
Yeah, you'll
Yes,
pick to
you
play
will-
a game that you think your audience will want to watch.
Yeah.
That's just every game. That happens.
It's not though. It's not for me at least.
It
Maybe
just
Andrew-
happens constantly. I pick old games I think my audience will like, and then I'm wrong about those sometimes too.
Sure.
Maybe
but
you know what? I'm gonna play Wukong so I could kill myself.
If anything, I've been like trending towards being more wrong than right most of the time because my channel's just been like slowly declining, and I can't tell if it's like Let's Plays as a whole or a demographic shift or what. Because I don't know how to make my Let's Play channel work anymore.
The thing is
It's the
that like
Chinese.
for me, for example,
It's not the Chinese.
It's not the Chinese.
I'm telling you, they own the Google. I think that's how it works. I read it on a Facebook post.
No,
I can't parse
we're not
anything you're
getting into
saying
that
today.
conspiracy theory.
I have not been able to understand a single thing you've spoken today.
I have, unfortunately.
I I will fall for this again for sure, but it's not going to be with Wukong 2 because I do look at new releases and go, maybe I should prioritize that because there will be people who can't afford this video game, this $60 video game that doesn't even run on my fucking 4090.
I'm glad. I'm glad you couldn't afford it, guys.
So people will
saved.
be looking for Let's Play videos so that they can sound opinionated on the internet. And I will be wrong about it again because continuously I'm not 100% cynical. I don't only pick games that I think will do well for my channel, but I do play some games that I'm like, all right, I'm going to prioritize this because it's going to get views maybe. But the thing is that I did this with Wukong because I thought it was a surefire that no one was going to play this fucking game except me because who the fuck can run this game? And I was wrong. Statistically, every single person in the world has played Wukong, and they're the only people that are interested in Wukong. So, yeah, that'll happen again for sure. Now,
Picking games has gotten really a lot harder. Like I'm starting to lose interest in the idea of even covering new games, which itself is absurd because obviously the basic logic of how you gain viewers and how you gain how you end up even making content people look for as a Let's Player, because you're not doing specific bespoke unique things like video essays. You inherently are just covering stuff. Obviously the trick is to cover things that are relevant, which means new. That's what makes them that. And increasingly it just doesn't work. Covering the on a regular basis, covering the new thing gets way less views than the other stuff because your existing audience will be like, well, I don't want to watch that because that's spoilers and I haven't played it yet. And then because your existing audience doesn't interact with it enough, it doesn't get shared with newer audiences. The algorithm's changed, I think, in a way where it's actively harder to reach new audiences with new games because your existing audience won't support it enough to boost it to them in the first place. And you're like, damn, man.
Yeah. I think that's why
I don't know if playing Mischief Makers is going to have the same potential for growth.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the big problem too is how do you cover games that people are excited about because everyone's fucking anal about spoilers? Bruh, I promise you, your gaming experience with Wukong is not going to be changed by knowing there's 3 tiger bosses. Fuck you. Stop caring about spoilers.
That's the other thing I started trying to make relevant thumbnails for each individual episode of playthroughs now because that's the wisdom of how to do better on YouTube because you're making a unique thumbnail which makes people more specifically understand, oh, that's new content, and it catches the eye and so on. And the backlash to that is that you're spoiling stuff of the game, so people get mad about that. I'm I'm sorry, but how else do I make stuff you click on? Because you guys aren't fulfilling your half of the agreement. I don't know how to reach you. I'm trying to reach you.
Is seeing something enough?
That's fair.
For me, I
heard that constantly. I had one generic placeholder thumbnail of the stalker enemy, the first little basic enemy for my entirety of my Subnautica playthrough, and I was getting so many compliments for not showing all the mega monsters and whatnot as thumbnails and so on. I'm like, okay, but those videos of people having those as their thumbnails are the ones everyone's watching.
I genuinely, this is a topic for another podcast. We don't have enough time to get into it, but I do genuinely think people need to just get the fuck over spoilers. The way that people walk on eggshells about spoilers is, I honestly think, genuinely media illiterate and devoid of understanding. And
it can be frustrating because the definition keeps broadening to even more confusing things.
Exactly.
One of the most confusing things that I got hit by was that I was in a Discord full of furries that like Monster Hunter a lot. And I learned the hard way that you are not supposed to talk about any upcoming Monster Hunter games and not talk about any reveals and not talk about any basic press releases about what monsters they're adding to the game because they don't want to be spoiled on what monsters are in the game this time, which ones are returning and stuff like that, or which ones are new.
Monster Hunter.
This being, of course, Monster Hunter, a franchise where it's basically impossible to even launch a mission without getting an extended introduction about the monster. Monster Hunter World, I think, is the one game that tries to have walk into an environment and just kind of wander around, man, and then you get jump scared by a cutscene of a new monster. But Rise is just it's the Juratodos mission. Here's an drawing of Juratodos. Here's the name Juratodos. Wow, this might be his weakness. Like, I haven't even seen him yet. Like, what do you mean you're gonna use? I'm gonna spoil you on Monster Hunter. The game refuses to let you be surprised by any creature in it while you're physically playing it, even if you blacked out all media around it. And it's like, that's not a narrative spoiler. That's not a mechanical spoiler. That's just like, the creatures wandering around is now one of the spoilers, and I'm like, I can't keep up with the definition of what people expect me to not talk about now.
I genuinely feel like people care more about like the immediate, effervescent, ephemeral gut reaction to seeing a new thing than they do understanding that thing in its context. To the point that where people
want the hype? Is that what you mean? Like,
no,
they just want the hype of seeing something new?
No, I just think that people. I don't even think it's about seeing something new. It's purely just like, oh my god, he pulled out a sword. Oh, like that's how
like
people respond to these
they
things.
want to feel the surprise, and they care about that more than the important thing of like actually following through with like re-engaging with that media and like unpacking like what it did that was meaningful and so on, and like caring
or like
about it on
even
a deeper
more
level.
than just that, like the experience.
Because we're tied into binge culture to an extent where like entire shows, their season exists in 24 hours and then everyone moves on. Yeah. It's like, don't spoil any of it, but also I'm not going to talk about it next week.
The big part of this too is just like people forget the journey aspect and are just so obsessed with the destination. And I know that sounds crazy when I'm talking about like not caring about spoilers, but like people talk about like getting spoiled on an Elden Ring boss, the final boss of the Elden Ring DLC. And it's like, bruh, I spent like 8 hours fighting that boss. I had the experience of seeing who it was once, and it quickly faded as I got to get to the interesting part, which was learning the boss, which was playing the boss and hearing the voice acting and being impressed by their performance and thinking about everything else. But people just use, I'm going to spoil a film, I guess, a little bit, but like learning the twist of Fight Club does not make Fight Club a worse movie to watch.
Yeah, and that's the thing most people know, because at this point it's almost impossible to see Fight Club without
the context. Exactly.
It's like it's Fight Club and Carrie and Sixth Sense are impossible to watch unspoiled, basically,
without knowing it. But the thing is that people will be like, oh, I'm spoiled on it.
If you buy Carrie, the ending's on the cover.
Yeah, I'm spoiled on it. I can't watch it. But that, like, the acting is good and the writing is good and the story is still good, even if you know like a minor detail about it. And granted, I'm not saying people should just go out and be like, Snape killed Dumbledore, haha. Like, don't be an asshole. Like,
except right now.
Don't spoil big twists. But like,
you're not spoil every big twist you see. Just run rampant.
With a Let's Play, even there is just there's like a difference between even just watching a Let's Play and playing a fucking game. Like, what do you think? It's okay, you're not gonna die clicking a Let's Play video, or even just like
it was a recurring thing that whenever I would cover a Souls-like that was coming out, and this was back when I was just using the same thumbnail for the same thumbnail for every episode. I would get a wave of comments saying that they're unsubscribing because I'm playing this game, because I would title my videos with
a name,
with the names of the bosses that I'm fighting. Titles that are themselves like were also like format first. They were like, let's play game name part number dash then the boss number. So there's like so much chance to not read the name of the boss even then.
Yeah,
it's like, really, just hearing a name of a boss.
Anyway, I think
spoilers.
That's part
you
of
fight
the
every living thing in this game because it's a Souls-like.
Yeah, wow, I think that's part of the reason why Let's Plays are just like slowly declining, though, is because like you get an audience that like, okay, Keith's audience likes puzzle games. Keith plays puzzle games. They watch because they want to see puzzle games. But then over time, that audience grows and gets like capital and can buy puzzle games. And now they're like, oh, I can't watch Keith play them until I'm done with Taiji. And it's like, bruh, are you really going to remember every single detail of all 300,000 puzzles in this game? Or could you just like watch the playthrough and then just play it? Like, there's no spoilers to be spoiled on. Your brain, I'm sorry to say, unless you have a photographic memory, is not going to be meaningfully, impactfully spoiled on the vast glut of these puzzles. You will be okay. And it's just like, it's just utterly baffling to me the way that like you shed an audience by cultivating an audience, and that really sucks. Like that is a big
I think I
problem.
uniquely disagree with specifically that example, just because like puzzle games can genuinely have like entire layers of reveals about what's going on that you are not meant to know going in a sort of like Outer Wilds.
I'm
or
not saying watch
away.
Outer Wilds though. I'm saying I
yeah,
don't
but you
think
don't know what puzzle games are going to do, and it's like
see, I disagree with that because I feel like puzzle games are really signposted. You know what you're getting into, even if there are layers of reveals.
It varies. Like there are like obviously like adventure games that are a specific formula, and then there are like Portal-like chambered puzzle games where they really are just a linear series of levels that might have a narrative twist. Like, and in that genre, every single time is that the narrator is evil. That's the only trick that genre can do. The narrator of that entire genre is evil every time, or lying to you in some way. That's literally because inherently that's the only way to like make the narrative match the vibe of the genre, is to like that it has to be some kind of unreliable narrator because it's about unpacking some deeper secret because it's a puzzle game. But then there's like the somewhat more open puzzle games, and those very frequently have some kind of layer where you like pull back the curtain on the entire world at some point. You're like, oh fuck.
But that's also not going to be episode 1.
Yeah.
Like, but that's also not going to be episode 1. I guess my point is though, like when we're just talking about games in general, I use puzzle games as an example because that's what your audience likes. But like,
yeah, but it's a struggle with all these like linear RPGs or literally just action games and stuff. And you're like,
you're not going to be spoiled on fucking Majora's Mask. I promise you, it'll be okay. You can watch the playthrough. Like it's okay. And if it gets to a point where you feel like your playtime is going to be impacted by it, that'll be 30 episodes into the fucking playthrough. You'll be all right. Like it's okay. Because I had people in my playthrough of Thief, a 23, 25-year-old game.
Thief. I've been saving
like,
it.
I like leaving a comment here. I haven't played Thief yet, but I'm really excited. And I'm like, bruh, if you haven't played it yet, like, it's fine. You'll be okay. The levels are open. It's an sim. You can make your own gameplay. You're not going to get spoiled on it. It's all right.
And I get it that this is sounding like entitled and like audience blaming and everything. And I get that. Because we're not entitled to viewership. And that's not really the point of this. But it's just that like, don't be surprised when YouTubers do tactics to get people to watch things. Because,
yes, exactly.
Like, it's actively hard to get you guys to watch things. Like we have infinite competitors, and like most of you don't use the subscriber tab, so you don't actually like see every new release in chronological order. You just watch what the algorithm suggests at you, which means that like you have to like trick your existing audience to watch stuff as much as possible so that it even gets shown to the people that don't actively seek out the live feed. So you're trying to
followers and subscribers are like a fake number at this point because people don't use the fucking app.
Yeah.
They don't use the thing the way they're supposed to.
People don't use the part that actually shows you what people make, and that's why people are constantly like, "Wow, YouTube didn't show this to me." It's like they may unsubscribe me or something. And it's like, no, you just don't curate and you don't keep up.
Attention.
Like I literally do still keep up with my subscription tab, and I manually remove every video that I'm not going to watch so I can then better keep track of all the ones, because obviously there's people that you watch that just upload like side content, or they have multiple shows you don't care about and the one thing you do care about. So like I don't just look at it and then click on what I feel like. I literally do consciously choose not to watch things from the people I'm watching and remove those from my feed so I can then better prioritize the ones I'm going to watch, and like I use it as an inbox like email. And that's still supported by YouTube fully, and I've never seen evidence of it ever actually not showing people videos like people claim. I think every single time people that say that just use the front page and don't understand that's not what subscriptions do.
Yeah.
Because my front page every
doesn't
day
show subscriptions.
it's almost exclusively channels I'm not even subscribed to. Like it's so consistently just a bunch of random channels I don't even watch.
Oh,
I'm like,
really?
That's
what
wild.
The fuck?
My front page
wild,
is all channels I'm subscribed to. It's Wolf Den, Any Austin, Noel playing games. I have like 30 of Keep and Colonel's videos on my front page.
That's cursed.
Yeah, like
Yeah, mine is very pure. Mine's
People
only
just-
got the stuff that I want to see.
Yeah.
yeah, people are really bad at curating, but in general,
No,
use the
my
fucking
first video on my
subscriptions
front
tab.
page is the Daily Show, which I'm not subscribed to because they spam so much content that I'm like, no, I don't want to watch the content mill of Daily Show where it's a bunch
Do
of
you tell them not to
recontextualized
show that to
clips.
you?
No, because I don't want to actively hide Jon Stewart from my entire YouTube. I will watch a Jon Stewart video. But it's like,
okay.
the second
Yeah.
video is by Splee5556. Can you beat Dark Souls while poop walking the whole time?
That was a good video.
I don't know who this is.
Never recommend
He's a-
channel. Never
he's a-
recommend channel is what I do.
No,
My
he's a,
fifth
yeah,
video,
you can
my
do
fifth
that,
video is
but-
Netflix is cooked by that dude Sam. Don't know who that is. Down there is
Sure,
hot,
but
hot,
it's
hot
recommending
heat.
things to
Yeah.
you based on the other stuff that you watch as well. that
Yes,
you
no,
might
I know what the
like.
algorithm is. I'm just saying
It's-
that my
it's lies.
my front page is not people I'm subscribed to.
I have things
Dinosaur
that are,
Office, all episodes by Demo Archive, and have you ever heard of Signalis by Pi City?
Yeah, I have
It has
videos like that too.
320 views.
I just also have all the new videos by people that I'm subscribed to. So that is there. Like the latest video essay that you did is also on my front page.
Yeah.
Next to Vib Ribbon Deserves Better, which is a video by someone with 5,000
The little
like,
wireframe
subscribers.
rabbit, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
a little guy.
Like all of that content is related. So I do understand using the front page.
Yeah,
but the
no,
subscriptions
it's
tab
good
also
for discovering
exists for a
stuff,
reason.
but it will actively just not show you people that you're actually subscribed to. Like it'll just skip revealing stuff to you that you'd like to watch.
Hmm.
Because
That's just
my
the thing that
front
it
page
does.
You
also
gotta curate that
shows
shit.
me you're like so it's literally right now on my front page is Keith Ballard Subnautica playthrough episode like 25, Andrew's
I summoned
Super
it.
Mario Bros.
Oh my god,
Wonder
our technology is
episodes.
listening to our voices and conjuring the things we say.
Yeah. I carried for once. Let's play Deadlock. Like
I did, I
Seed Hunting
carried.
Begins. Super Mario Bros. Wonder episode 18. Like I still get all that stuff. I have so much Tim Kaine on my front page because he's just been in my subs for a long time. Like the front page will surface subs for people unless they're just deranged and don't curate their content. If you are
Yeah,
just
yeah.
constantly watching
But it
random
will also
shit,
just hide stuff. Like if you're
Yeah.
a channel that regularly makes content instead of someone that makes it occasionally,
it will not show
YouTube
every single
doesn't
thing.
work
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you
yeah.
on a regular basis anymore. Yeah, because like
Yeah, absolutely.
it will filter out most of your stuff and be like, oh, you upload multiple Let's Plays a day or multiple Let's Plays a week. I'll show
Here's a
people
random
like
video from your
the-
backlog. Yeah.
like I'll show people the one popular thing you uploaded this month, which is itself is like a paradoxical concept because it only gets the chance to be popular based on whether it was shown to people in the first place and that whole mess. So it's like
Yep.
it's
Yeah,
for
I
all-
know.
and I don't even know if people
popular video is not.
Yeah. Because like on some level, maybe it's people interacting via your subscription box and commenting and liking on stuff, but it's also like A/B testing of it, just like throwing it
Yeah.
on a bunch of like random pages with other videos, and then based on its click-through rate, deciding whether or not your video gets to matter this time.
I also just literally turn notifications on for channels that I actually give a fuck about. That
Yeah.
helps.
That's a good
That
idea.
Genuinely does help. I get notifications every day for all the channels I watch every day.
I have like
that-
one channel that I do that for. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I have one channel I do
ultimately,
that
I mean,
for.
again, this isn't like a viewer issue. It is just like this is the nature of the industry, and I do think that people overvalue spoilers. And like, this isn't me saying like shame on you for overvaluing that and not clicking our videos. It's me saying like, this is why our videos don't do super well, and like why Let's Plays are slowly declining.
Yeah.
And if you want Let's Plays to keep existing, you have to support them. That doesn't even just go
People
for Let's
complained
Plays
my
of video
Sigma
games.
Pause video had a red arrow on it and called it clickbait, and I'm like, first of all, a red arrow is not clickbait on any definition. That's just not what it means. It's
Yeah.
not tricking you into clicking on anything. It's just a red arrow pointing at one of the things on the screen. But that fucking video is the third most popular video already on my essay channel. Like it passed the plush video. It's past, like it's like on its way to the point where like I imagine it'll overtake the Ad Astra video eventually and become the second most popular video. Like the red arrows work. Illusory knows, he has them on all of his videos. Just out of spite, I'm going to start A/B testing red arrows. I'm going to make a red arrow version and non-red arrow version of every thumbnail on my video essay channel, maybe. And YouTube will make the one that does better win. And guess what? It's going to be the one with the red arrow because it works on you. That's
funny.
the game.
I think for me, I've resigned that like my channel will probably never be huge, and that's okay. And if I can make some money off of it, that's cool. But also, like, I do it for the purposes of archivism, and I'm trying to put stuff out there that like Let's Plays that I wish existed. Because if I was me from 10 years ago, I would have wanted to see a 1000 times resist playthrough on YouTube, and there aren't many of those, like things like that. Just like providing a service, I guess. And like, but again, like I have people for my fucking Lunacid playthrough in the comments like, oh, I can't watch this because of spoilers. It's a dungeon crawler. What spoilers? What spoilers are going to get spoiled on in a dungeon crawler with multiple endings? What are you talking about? It's okay.
People are weird. They got
this
bad ideas, and they
we went
spread it all
places
over
ultimately.
the
Wukong sucks. Don't
Wukong
play
sucks.
it or buy it. Watch our playthroughs instead.
I was gonna say that's pretty
we
much.
we
the
will have
only-
no effect on its cultural outcome because it's already spent. It's already happened. But
Yeah.
You're not beating China. Yeah.
I think history will be unkind to Wukong, and it's got an opening. I just mean in terms of that, like it has an opening, like fucking buzz that's where people are acting like it's great, and like that's going to sour.
Bioshock Infinited.
Yeah, it's going to be
It's-
Bioshock
it's a
Infinite, where it's
nothing
like
game.
people are going to realize that it's garbage and always was.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that video essay. Wukong is bad, and here's why.
I don't want to
Coming
be.
from
Wukong was
Boring
actually
Keith
bad?
in 2026.
Oh my God.
I don't want to be doxxed.
I mean, you're not gonna get doxxed.
No, he might.
Yeah,
No,
no,
you'll
Get
be
attacked
that's
by the
fine.
Dark
You'll be-
Army.
yeah. Like there is like some
be
concern
fine.
of like, oh, it's the fucking like. It's a patriotic symbol,
Fine,
essentially, of an entire
You could
country.
put it under my
that's
name,
overhyped.
Vin. Fine.
I know. I
It's
want the
okay.
money and clout. You don't
You
get
can
to
have the money
it.
and clout. Just say I wrote it, and then they'll all come
That's
after
not
me, and
what
it's fine.
clout
You can't-
is.
No, they don't care. They'll ignore that and they'll say that Keith made the video.
Damn. All right. Well.
Okay.
Oh well.
I need to shower the Wukong off me. I'm done.
Yep,
Goodbye.
we were over time. That's why
Yay.
Colonel RPG vanished mid podcast because he has a hard cutoff time. That's 2 hours after we're supposed to start, and he has to go off to do other stuff. So he just disappeared
Yes.
because he couldn't because the conversation was
Vanished.
happening. That's why that happened. See you guys next time.
Yep.
Bye.
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 I probably won't see you.
Fine.